Meeting to order. Excuse me, Bills? Calling the meeting to order. Okay, great. And let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Welcome return, Madam Clerk. Would you like to take roll?
Thank you. Councilmember Whitmer?
Yep.
Councilmember Lewis? Here. Councilmember DeGolia?
Here.
Vice Mayor Weiss?
Here.
Mayor Lindros?
Here. Okay. No presentations today? So it's an unusually large crowd, which is always nice to see. Do we have a sense of is everybody speaking on one issue, or is it a number of issues, or do we know? No?
Bikes, trees, trains.
Bikes, trees, can I see bikes, trees, train?
All right, well, let's start first with public comments and things not on the agenda. We'll take it from there. So any members of the public have comments for items that are not on the agenda this evening? Please come forward. Sure.
My name is Larry Chen. I'm the current city council member of City of Cupertino, former mayor. I just come back from Backman meeting almost all day in San Francisco. Just want to report back to you. Thank you for your support. The Backman unanimously voted to pass Regulation 11, Rule 18, which will be more protective for the air quality for the entire Bay Area. And at the beginning, I was a little bit worried because the chair was talking about maybe, we'll postpone it. And I know in politics, you postpone it, sometimes that's the tactic to delay it, And because Chevron and Shell bust their employee and then occupy the whole room, so quite a lot of people don't have a place to stand. And then by the time for my turn to talk, they only say you only have 1 minute. Okay, so I went over there 7 o'clock in the morning and until got back about 3:30, and just for that 1 minute speech. But thanks very much. Thanks Atherton, the Polar Valley, Woodside, all your council member, and then Lasolo Hill, Lasolo, City of Cupertino, and then also Mountain View, all write a letter. So I give them a stack. They look at it. That's very impressive. And thank you very much. Without those, 1 minute probably cannot do it. And I just want to hear it. Thank you very much. And then hopefully we'll work together because the next big fight is coming up. The Lehigh, the cement plant, they are going to apply for the new pit mine. And if the Santa Clara County approve it, that will be another 100 years pollution for the entire region here. So that's why we need to get together, prepared for the fight for next year. And thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Barry.
Good evening.
Anybody else want to speak on this one?
I'm sorry.
I apologize. We're Phil. Please.
It's the weather.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Crowley, and I've lived here for 38 of my 40 years, and this is my home. It's changed a lot in the last 15 years, right? And the matter that I wanted to just bring to your attention tonight, because I was just curious, I came just to find out what was going on with the Middlefield Bike Lane project, because I have no idea, but I saw it on the agenda. But I also just wanted to kind of bring to your attention that I'm a bike commuter. I'm trying to be part of the solution to the traffic nightmare that we have here on the peninsula, I feel like. And I live 4 miles from where I work. I work at Menlo School and I live in Redwood City. And so I decided last January to start cycling to work because shoot, it's not that far. And I've learned a lot, and it's mostly an amazing way to get to work, and I love it. Except for some very short stretches of road through Atherton, and I actually avoid the vast majority of the roads that are marked with sharrows. And so I just wanted to thank the town of Atherton actually for putting sharrows on the road in the first place, because it makes everybody sort of aware that there are cyclists out there, which I really appreciate. As a cyclist and a driver, I'm both. And I also wanted to thank ended up calling the police one day a couple weeks ago when I was literally run off the road by a car, and I wanted to tried to report it, and the gentleman who responded was really, really wonderful and very kind, and I really appreciated. I unfortunately don't remember his name, but he was wonderful. So I wanted to express my thanks to him and the police department for their hard work here. And I do think there are probably some creative things that could be done in Atherton to reduce the through traffic. And that would make it safer for bikes too, so more pleasant for residents and bikes. And so if there's anything that the cycling community can do to support that, I would be all for it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, can we just offer to her that we do have a bike ped committee that does have open meetings, correct?
Yeah, the Bike Ped Committee, it's on our website. You're welcome to come to the meeting, and we do have some representatives that are not Atherton residents, because it's kind of an at-large thing, so, is there space available? First off, it's public, you can come, but also, if you wanted to join, you fill out an application and send it to our city clerk.
On our website.
All right,
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda Sell, and I was just following up on Councilmember Chang. We went to BACMed hearing today, and overwhelmingly, unanimously, 18 votes to 0, with 6 board members absent. It passed unanimously. What the rule does is it will take the threshold for mitigation from 100 fatalities in 1 million to 10 fatalities in 1 million for mitigation. So if they're above 10 fatalities in 1 million in the future, then they'll have to have mitigation. Whereas right now, the threshold is 100 fatalities in 1 million. So you could see what a great improvement that was. And like Councilmember Chang said, your letters and letters of all the other cities just, wowed the board members. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to comment on items not on the agenda? Okay. Jack?
Hi, I'm Jack Brigham. I've lived in the town for 51 years. I've been through many parcel tax elections, and I'm getting tired of them. This last election, I was disappointed but not surprised that we lost. They had very active and organized opposition. I think if it comes back on the ballot again in June, that same opposition would be there, and it would be very unlikely to pass in June. So I think we need another source of funding, a permanent source. And one thing that we've discussed in the past is a real estate transfer tax. And I think that's worth bringing up and talking about again. Palo Alto, Mountain View, San Mateo all have it. And they also have sales tax revenue. We don't have the sales tax revenue, so we should probably consider the parcel tax again. I know there are trade-offs. We'd have to become a charter city, and that has pros and cons, but I think it should be at least studied again. About funding the town center, I know the council had it studied and presentations during the spring and summer about a loan or bonds. And I think that should be considered again to fund the town center. It's going to have a life of 50 or more years, and it seems like a real challenge to try and pay for it up front. So it would seem prudent again to study this once more and see if we can't find a way to deal with it. One last thing, minor source of possible revenue for the town. I notice the parking lot is getting fuller and fuller all the time. All the other station parking lots charge $5 a day for parking. And I think, I know we charged for parking there once before. I suspect we're encouraging parking there now because of construction, and we want to keep the contractors, people off the streets, but I think that's a possible source of revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fowler?
I'm Bob, my senior. I've been a resident of Atherton for 43 years, so I'm a rookie. But I had an experience on election night that I want to share with you. At 8:05, there were 3 precincts in, and the vote was 51 or 52 to 48, 49. And I got a reading between then and 9 o'clock that said 61% for and 38% against. And it showed 400 more votes than are there now. So I, as an auditor all my life, tried to figure out what the Jesus happened. So I went up to the registrar's office, and they showed me every reporting that they made for the night and the reporting that they made yesterday. And none of them reflected the numbers that I saw. And I communicated those numbers at the time, so I didn't dream them up. I communicated with 2 other individuals. So I asked the registrar what it would cost to recount to be satisfied that there wasn't something irregular. And they said it would cost about $1,000, which is unbelievable, because I tried to recount several years ago and it was going to cost $8,000. So I think but it's a very small cost. But the thing that they're going to do a sample Monday. It's a normal procedure. They sample 1 precinct for each election. So I'm going to be there, and I suggested somebody from the city be there. And I've called Sandy Crittenden and suggested that he have somebody there. So if there is an irregularity, that they would all be there to witness it and decide whether a recount is justified. And of course, I think it depends on which district or which precinct they select, but they roll a dice, so it's not, they don't have to, they don't decide. So after that recount of that 1 precinct on Monday, we have 10 days to decide whether to do a recount. And based on assuming that there's no irregularities on that 1 precinct, I just, I don't know, have to look at the results in total. But there's still 400 votes less than what I had at 9 o'clock results. So I still think there's 400 votes that I think are, we looked at every other race in the county to see if there was anything similar to ours, and there was nothing. So those are the facts. We'll see what happens Monday morning, but I would suggest that the council consider doing a recount. It's only $1,000, and on $1.5 million a year, I think you can waste $1,000 if there's any question in your mind.
Thank you. Any other comments from any member of the public on items not on the agenda? Okay, still seeing a large number of people here. Let's see if we can take a quick poll to see if we can handle this more efficiently so people can get out. What are the items?
Item number 15, which is the tentative parcel map. That one's actually going to be recommended for automatic continuance to March 21st of 2018. Anyone here to speak about the comments in that report about heritage tree removals can speak under the Civic Center item, which addresses the same issue. And then there was also the Middlefield Class 2 bike lane item. And then there's the potential for comments on the PCD on the consent agenda.
I'm sorry.
Council and corridor electrification plan agreements.
Okay.
3 bikes and lanes.
Can I just take a quick poll of the audience? There are 3 things that the city manager mentioned. Could I see a show of hands of people who are here to talk about the bike paths and plans? Okay. Is that 2? I'm sorry.
I'm doing the presentation.
Oh, okay. Okay. Pass 2.
She doesn't want to get scratched.
Electrification corridor
We're
issue.
here on behalf of Caltrain.
Okay. And then the trees issue. So it's really.
And item number
Which is trees.
But that's moved down.
is a merger on the parcel. Okay. Why don't we just try to get through them as quickly as we can, then? Does that work? Can we first then move to the consent calendar?
City Commissioners report.
Oh, city manager's report, I'm sorry. See, I was trying to get there quick. There you go.
Forgot the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You do have the written report before you, as I just mentioned. Item number 15 will be automatic recommendation for continuance to March 21st of 2018, so you won't be opening the public hearing or taking any comments on it. Folks here for the pre-issue in that should comment on the Civic Center item, but there's a number of items in the city manager's report. Staff's here to answer any questions the council might have, or the council can provide any comment.
First of all, any members of the public have comments on the city manager's report? Seeing none, let me ask, any members of the council have comments on the city manager's report? Okay. Want to make sure we're good? All right, I'm looking, I'm starting to see your comments on the Measure F discussion.
That's at the very beginning of the report.
Oh, there we go, sorry. Pardon? Yeah, yeah. So the main point is that I'd like to ask, or just make a comment on, is that we plan a full discussion of this at the next regularly scheduled council meeting in December, where we flesh it out in public, and anybody who's interested is more than welcome to attend.
That's the December 6th study session.
So, since you brought that up, I just want to say that the city manager report had the current information at the time of his report about it, but actually the total number of votes and the percentages have changed. The most recent show that the total number of yes votes are 970 at 52.75%. The total number of no votes was 869, for a total of 47.25%, for a total voting amount of 2,239 votes cast, and that is of the 4,777 registered voters. Just doing a quick calculation from public comment made by Greg Conlon, if he felt that there was an additional 400 votes for the yes side, that would only bring, excuse me, I made a mistake.
Yeah, 1839.
Yeah, it's because it would bring the yes votes to 1,370, and you would need 1,492 for a 2/3, and so that would still not be enough to, and that's where I got the 2,000. So but the percentages now are 52.75 yes and 47.25 no. So that's the most recent tally. Got it?
So Mike?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Oh, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to say, I saw the article that Councilwoman Lewis wrote for the Almanac, and I thought it was excellent, very well done, and I feel that personally it represents my view on where we should be and how we should move forward. So I thank her for putting that into words and getting that word out there, because I think that in some cases, things were getting, by one party, perhaps a little divisive, and I think that this really, that article really did a good job in saying, look, we got responsible people here, we have a responsible staff, we know how to manage this stuff, and we're going to manage it properly, and we're not going to put your safety at risk and things like that. So I thought it was an excellent article, and I just wanted to publicly say that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, we now move on to the consent calendar.
Yes.
Now I'll turn and ask if there's any member of the public who would, consent calendar items 8 through 14 on the agenda, or any member of the public who would like to pull any items from the council and ask the same question. Is there any member of the council who'd like to pull on? Yes, Mr. Boyd?
I'd like to pull 13.
Item number 13. Okay. Any other?
And just a comment, there are modifications to both sets of minutes, and based on some comments and feedback from the council, those are up to Diane, and will be as amended.
Okay. So then we would be happy to consider any motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item 13.
So moved.
I have one final.
Oh, yes.
I have 2 areas of comments on 11 and 12, just strict comments. And that's it. Oh, okay. So, comment on number 11. I just wanted to thank George and staff. One thing that just kind of gave a point of clarity when George references salary study information. What we're considering here is a little bit unique, so I know that George did his due diligence in doing a salary comparison on all the new ads. So I just wanted to put that in the record, that we're aware of that, and we do know that it's a hybrid situation. On that would be number 11. And number 12, I wanted to say thank you to staff and your continued efforts to try to save us money. So I noticed that we saved $26,390 because we haven't approved the rating up to $50,000. So thank you, and that's going to be important as we move on. So, two comments.
Mayor,
Please.
since you opened it up for number 11, to have a comment, this does segue into the reason why we're making this is because Mr. Tyler's return.
Since he is in the audience.
And I just want to do a little shout out, and I'm sure we're going to do something really nice for you at the end of the year, but thank you so much for all your years of service. And
My pleasure.
honestly, we will really miss you, and not just us, but many, many of the other residents in town and everyone.
She's surely speaking for all of us. So.
I am speaking for everybody here,
Well,
but he can speak for
but I
himself
just want to
too.
make sure you don't have the illusion that you're going to be off the hook.
We've got your speed dial.
I'll not be changing my address.
Okay.
Yeah, so getting back to the consent calendar then.
So can I get
motion?
We move with the comments and the exception of item number 13 being pulled.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
But I will abstain from 9 because I had some problems reading it.
Okay.
You're abstaining from number 9?
Yeah,
Yes.
check register.
That's some issues.
And Carrie told me that he took care of it, I didn't need to bother.
Yeah, there you go.
You can't trust him. Yes, you can. You can't trust him.
I don't say we can trust him.
Yes.
That's between Bill and I reading those, so it's my glasses were on this week.
Shall we, let's go to the, well, we're ready to continue item 15, presumably we want to go there for next.
Sure, staff recommendation is that you continue item 15 automatically without opening the public hearing of comments until March 21st, 2018.
But we're gonna talk about the heritage tree issue, and then when we discuss this, then we could take those comments into consideration at that time.
Under the civic center item.
Okay, great.
Do we need a formal motion done?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Okay. Now we'll move to item number 13.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This one, I'm gonna really look to Mike Kashawazi and the city attorney to provide the council any feedback and Q&A on this. Basically, all it is you're directing staff to continue negotiation and finalize an agreement with Caltrain for their PCEP project, electrification corridor project in the town. Any questions?
Okay. Questions, clarifying questions from the public? If not, we can get them from council.
So there are 2 things that I feel particularly concerned about with this item and as we go into putting an agreement together with Caltrain. And one is there's been a significant amount of discussion about where these catenary poles are going to go. And my understanding is not referenced in the staff report, but my understanding is that Caltrain has agreed that they're going to go in the middle of the tracks in order to, and the reason for that is to minimize the removal of trees on the sides of the the tracks next to the park, so the south end of the town, where they had said they would, my understanding was they said they'd be putting the poles in the middle of the tracks, except for the region at the south of the town, along the park, and we walked that, and it was agreed that, there were some connection requirements, but the main poles were gonna go down the middle of the track. I wanna make sure that's in the agreement. And the second thing, which hasn't been mentioned so much, but I think from a visual impact is extremely important, is how high these OCS electrical poles are. And the staff report says that they will be approximately 25 to 30 feet. And I wanted in the motion that they won't be more than 30 feet.
25.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I want to give some flexibility
Why
to
is the
staff,
range?
but
Why would they have a range?
Well, the intent of this agreement is mainly to facilitate the project work.
yeah.
We could certainly add comments in the recitals and that sort of thing with respect to what the council's feedback is, but I don't think this agreement is a binding agreement with respect to the design of the project.
In fact, we can't. It's within the right of way, under the state law, they answer to the PUC and nobody else. It's like they are not in Atherton, they're on sovereign soil in the middle of the, and they know we can't do anything to them, because I spoke with their attorney this week, and he's not a bad guy, he just said, you know, within the four walls of the two sides of their right of way, they're pretty much free to do anything the PUC allows to do.
Well, does that include lighted people?
Excuse me?
Does that include lighted people? I mean, if they say they're gonna be at a certain height, then they ought to be at that height. I don't have a problem, I just want some honesty and direct,
Right.
so we can set our expectations and our residents can set their expectations because of the potential impact of their property values.
We can certainly put that in the agreement, we can certainly address that, it is the council's request. I don't know that we have the ability to go out on the tracks and measure them. It's illegal to be out on the railroad tracks. So, but sure, we can, I think,
I don't think that's the issue.
I think the problem is we can't make them do anything, but we can certainly ask them to respect their wishes. Which we've done in the draft, we've asked them to respect things like the town's prohibition on nighttime construction, to which they said, we can't.
I think that's good. I think what's in there is good. All I'm saying is, there's some concerns I've gotten from residents who are highly concerned about the impacts on them. And, you know, I mean, I know that we have not been in favor of the electrification, but it's moving forward and I'm not trying to play games with it. All I'm saying is, the communication does is that the poles are gonna be 25 to 30 feet. I wanna make sure they're not gonna be more than 30 feet. They've said that they're gonna be in the middle of the tracks. I wanna make sure that's true so that we can protect our trees. These are things that are very important.
In addition to putting it in the agreement as a recital or what have you, we do have a couple of representatives from Caltrain here in the audience. Perhaps they could speak to those two particular issues on the record.
Thank you.
But-
That's what I was gonna
Yes,
say.
but one of the things I think, to Rick's comment, is that they have made representations to us that they were going to do this, and putting it in as a recital in the agreement, I think, just shows, and then abiding by it, just shows the good faith, all right? Because we're, trying to work with them also.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be antagonistic here, but there's some things that are of great concern to our residents, and I've heard about it, and I wanna make sure that we are properly representing those residents with their concerns, and that Caltrain is going to abide by the representations that we've received.
Since we do have representative Caltrain, are you able to come up and address any of these issues?
Would you like to step into the hot seat?
Yes. I've been waiting for this all day. Hi, Stacy Koch, Principal Planner for the Electrification Project. I don't think they're unreasonable requests at all. With regard to center pole, I just want to also be transparent in what it is that we can commit to. So with the center poles, where we've committed to that is adjacent to the Holbrook Palmer Park, and we gave a previous presentation with the tree plan. So where the track centers are wide enough, that's where we can commit to the center poles. There's some areas within Atherton that the track spacing is not wide enough, and we don't have that work in our contract. So we can provide some language, some specifics of where the tracks are wide enough and include that in the agreement. I don't see that as a problem. With regard to the pole heights, I do understand, and what I will say is we can put in language. The 25 to 30 feet is a reference to our environmental impact report, and that was based at very preliminary engineering design, 35% level. We now have started receiving the 65% and issued for construction, essentially 100% designs. And the poles in some instances are taller than that, so we're seeing some about 40 to 45 feet. And so we can add that clarifying language so that we can't commit to the 25 to 30. We know that in some areas, depending on the pole type, how big it is, if it's a type that needs to span the two tracks, it's got a bigger foundation, and then it's a taller pole to support the civil engineering needs of that pole. So we have that detail, and we can again provide that language and see if it's acceptable to the city in a more accurate representation of what some of the poles could be up to.
So just a quick, so that's within the town of Atherton, you're saying some will be as high as 45 feet high?
Yes.
That's what she's saying, could be.
It could be, yeah.
Well,
So we're.
Sorry, but you said 100% done on the engineering.
So we're starting. Yeah, sorry. Let me back up. I probably skipped a few things that are in my head. So we have 4 construction segments. We're starting in segment 2 and 4. Atherton is in segment 2, and we're starting at the north end, which is South San Francisco. Atherton is actually at the very south end of segment 2. And so as we're going through the jurisdictions, we've got 100% for South City, for example. In that plan set, we're seeing some 2-track cantilevers that are in the 40 to 45 foot range. We just received the 65% in for Atherton, and so we'll be coming to meet with the town to go through what the specifics are for Atherton. So it's a kind of a rolling design progression.
Within Atherton, at that 65% plan, are there some poles that will be 65, that will be 45 feet high?
Yeah, I believe that between 40 and 45.
Between 40 and 45.
Yeah.
Do you know where?
That's a lot more than 25.
Yeah, that's
That's a significant change.
I'm sorry,
But we had that in the environmental impact.
So I'm actually shocked because I'm just getting, and I've been sitting in every meeting for how long, blah, blah, blah. And I get this 65% design component. What I understood was if there was a height issue, was a topography issue, blah, blah, that may adjust. But now I'm hearing a little bit different because that should have been part of the base discussion when we were discussing center pole locations. As far as type, if we're up to 45 feet, that's a considerable difference between 25 and 30. I'm a little surprised that, that we're now hearing that these poles, because yeah, great, you're moving Atherton, but now we have a problem.
Yeah, the higher poles are, like I said, with the 2-track cantilever, which is a result of trying to avoid tree impacts, so there's a balance there. We could go back and look at what other pole types, we could look at a trade-off between what, lowering the pole type with a different configuration of a pole type that could then result in more tree impacts as an option.
Out of sheer curiosity, because I wasn't in the general conversations related to trees, other than stating as many as possible, blah, blah, but I don't recall any conversations that said we would raise the pole height to stay away from tree locations.
Yeah, it's not about raising the pole height, it's just the pole type and what that is needed in order to span 2 tracks versus spanning 1 track. So the overall pole becomes larger. It wasn't something that we were trying to hide, and perhaps we should have done a better job at conveying that. It was not our intent to not convey that. It really wasn't.
Well, I think the critical issue here is transparency.
Sure.
And I think that if there are trade-offs in terms of pole heights and pole types, that we need to see those trade-offs.
Sure, that's fair.
Because maybe there's shorter poles that have more impact on trees, but at least at the minimum, there should be total transparency so that you engage the community and we can assess what makes the most sense for our community.
I understand, yeah, I agree.
And I just interject a little bit, and thank you for opening this door. We got a reputation of not necessarily being so friendly, related to this particular topic. This is why we're not friendly. I mean, we don't want to be surprised if these were full level discussions, even at staff level. I think that staff would have reiterated this 9 or 10 times when we were talking about trees, just to make sure some of us would understand that, because this is what your trade-off is. You're gonna save this tree, and now, I don't wanna cause you guys any delays, but it sure sounds like you're moving into area 2. You're not here yet. But now, how long is it gonna take to iron out the difference between a 45-foot height pole versus a tree component? I mean, and I know you're in the middle, unfortunately. So is some of my colleagues here that don't get this all the time like I do. But I want this relationship to be transparent, because we have to now relay that information to several of my rail committee members that are sitting in the audience that are already, I can see, not happy that this topic is coming out. So we gotta figure out how we can,
What's that process look like?
Yeah.
Because we've been relying on a set of information that you gave us initially, right? And so that's in black and white, what we've discussed, and that's what our expectations are. And so we're kind of cheap to the game.
Also,
Yeah, so, I can understand that if you put a center pole in there, it needs to be able to support the overhang on both tracks. But normally the way you would do that is the base of that pole would have to be wider, it might need to be deeper, okay? But I can't see that making it taller is part of the structural engineering, all right? I just don't see, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I like my fellow council people that feel that, if there was a trade-off that needs to be made, we need to fully understand that. We appreciate the fact that you saved as many trees, but we didn't know what the end result was. The other thing that I do want to bring up, because I've heard from a number of people, is your hours of operation. So I understand you want to wait for the rush hour traffic. The rush hour trains start about 6 o'clock in the morning. Oh, by the way, they're over about 9. And then it goes every hour or every half hour. I think it's every hour. And then it starts up again around 4:30. So, I would hope that in highly populated areas that you would be doing a lot of the heavy noise work in the day. Now, I just don't see that. So the residents that live near the train tracks put up with the horns, in many cases honking in our quiet zone. And then from there, and in the middle of the night for periods of 2 or 3 times, they're going to be up until 6 o'clock in the morning, listening to auger drilling as well as ratchet lug nuts tying things down. And I think that's a lot to ask of people. And so I would hope that you would really look at your production schedule and then kind of tell us in a section by section as to what you can do, as opposed to this is what we are going to do. I understand, from our attorney, you can tell us whatever you want, but I think you want to try and have a good relationship with the town. And I think that this noise issue is going to be a problem, and I think it's going to be a problem in other towns, especially as you go further down the tracks where it's high density housing there. There are a lot of people you're going to be disturbing. So I do wish that you would relook at that and maybe come back with different windows and tell us what you could do. All right, I'd be most appreciative, because it is a concern. The noise is a concern. The size of the poles is a concern. Thank you.
If I could, again, I understand you're in a difficult situation standing here representing the entire agency. I understand the law apparently says that we can't compel you to do certain things. You are certainly free to agree to do certain things.
Sure.
Would you be willing to agree to work with us and in fact to seek our approval before moving forward on the poles and the hours and other sort of working conditions that will affect, or building conditions that will affect our residents?
I I'm not able to make that commitment. I'll take it back and we can follow up. I think almost two separate issues, just given the nature of what they are, and if I can just expand on that a little bit in the theme of transparency. With the polls, that's a lot smaller of an animal for us to handle. We've got a little bit of time. We're at 65%, so I think that we've got some time to work through that. And so that one is likely something that we can commit to, but I've got to come back to you guys. The work hours is a pretty big deal, and the reason why I say that is not because we're exempt from local land use and zoning and things of that nature, is that those work hours are already in the contract that we've provided to Balfour Beatty. So that's why I say it's a bigger deal, is now we have a contractual issue of, we would potentially be limiting work that they've said that they were able to use. So that one will take a conversation with different folks, but I hear you, and I understand the request, so I'll take it back, and then we'll get with Mike with a response.
Just before we leave, one more comment on the polls. And I'm sure you can understand that it's a surprise to us when, my proposal was that we limit this to make sure it doesn't go over 30 feet, and that proposal causes us to discover that in fact there are some poles that are 150% higher than that. I want to make sure that if in fact Caltrain is considering those other poles for a reason, because of their reach and you have to cover the tracks, that the poles that you are considering are standard and are used in other communities, because certainly there's cantilever lines
Absolutely.
and lots of other train communities. And I'm sure there's a difference where you deal with what kind of poles may be required in the San Francisco train yard or in certain kinds of industrial settings than there are in residential communities where these cantilever lines go. And I just want to make sure that the poles are standard, not some exceptional and therefore larger type of pole.
I think that's a step, and I think that might imply that you're okay with 45 feet, but I think we're really okay with 25 to 30 feet. So I prefer they look like trees, but they're not going to. So I think that that's the foundation we want to start from. We like 25 to 30 feet, but I do think we need to work together, and Councilmember DeGolio is exactly correct. If we got to that point, but we're not there, remember, we're stuck on 25 to 30. What he said implies it would be okay, and he's not saying that, but he doesn't want ugly poles. We prefer trees, but that's not the case. So can we work with staff? And I'm concerned, like Councilmember DeGolio's comments, related to going forward in an agreement without that kind of framework to understand, and also having exactly the same concerns that Councilmember Whitmer has related to the time constraints, because you're going to be under time constraint to get something back, and we're going to be under time constraint to make decisions to look at these things. So step number one, keep us at the smaller poles. We'll work on that and come back to that. If we have the language necessary, if we have to put that language in, I'm not saying that apparently not necessarily putting that, but it wouldn't hurt to have that agreement in this language, but to work with staff to get us to a level where we're all comfortable with where we're going.
I think the direction is that whatever language we can work out to address the pole height issue in terms of the town's review process and opportunity for input, you're willing to put into this agreement and agree to.
Well, and the mayor's request is, I think we'd love to see that happen. That would be our focus.
Mr. Mayor, just so the record's really clear, Mike and I took the contract that they gave us, and I think to say we were harsh would be kind with respect to hours of construction and things like that, to the point where their chief counsel from San Francisco, Mike Conrad, from Hanson Bridget called me to talk about it. And basically, he's the one who said, look, we love you guys, one of our partners lives in Appleton, but we're constrained, and we're constrained, we're gonna do what we have to do, which I thought was absolutely inappropriate, and I think the council has made it very clear, it's not okay. And we didn't talk about pole heights because nobody has ever said it. I wrote down notes, I'm gonna go back and look at the EIR and see what mitigation measures are in the EIR, and if they didn't propose something less than, if they proposed 40 or 45 feet, then shame on us, we missed it. But if they proposed 25 to 30 feet, that's their mitigation measure, and if they want to reopen the EIR to talk about that, we would be more than happy to accommodate them, I'm sure.
So let's try the friendly approach.
I appreciate that. I'm a fan of that one too.
Okay? So, Mayor.
Well, what do you need, Mr. Manager, on this?
Direction to, council's comments this evening to authorize the city attorney and city manager to staff to work with Caltrain to draft an agreement that's acceptable, with the caveat that that agreement needs to address the pole height issue to the town's satisfaction, or we don't execute the agreement.
And they need to come back with something that they possibly can do, even if it's within that window, but they'll try and do as much as they can in the 8 to 10 shift, or something like that. Because we did bring up the noise issue, it is important, you know, maybe we should have their partner live, you know, camp out next to the tracks and see how they're like.
I told them we were gonna post his phone number.
I think that's a good idea.
Actually, Mr. Connor and their council did indicate they were gonna get back to me with proposed language that said they would try to do as much as they could. But he didn't
If I
mention
could,
there
in
was
this-
a contract.
In this process too, and I don't mean to keep, throwing constraints on. I think transparency would be very, very important, and it would be nice if we made this a regular item on the council agenda, and if you are willing, or some of your colleagues are willing to come back and give us regular reports. Because being surprised by something like this is never helpful, and if we can hear about it in advance, it would be much smoother way along.
Just to that point, what's the ETA for hitting it?
It wouldn't be until, sorry, I just.
Yeah.
I was gonna try to settle.
He ran.
No, I think actually just so far looking at the schedule, we wouldn't be getting anywhere near Athens until probably the beginning of the year at the earliest, is what we're looking at. We've got a lot of work to finish up on the northern end of the peninsula. At the current moment, they're still working in South San Francisco and San Bruno, so that's still quite a ways away. You got about a good, somewhere around 20 miles in between there, before we can get to Atherton. So that's my best guess at the point without having a schedule in front of me. Certainly that's information I can share with staff when I go back and see what our baseline schedule says where the construction is going to be for Atherton.
2 meetings. Yeah. We have 2 meetings, I think it would be very helpful to get regular reports, right? Those meetings.
I would make a motion with George's suggestion.
We might have public comment.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
There's a rail committee meeting on December 2nd, which is a couple weeks away, that we could help spend some more time on it than you could. So if you want them to come to us first and see if we can scrub it down a little.
I would say that Mike has made some suggestions that you guys attend, so there's an email that's going out as soon as we've had a discussion this morning. Yeah, that's an offer, and if you accept that.
Yeah, I got that email. Yeah, we'll be there.
Okay.
Thank you very much for this. Now, first, did we get a comment?
I'm okay with the motion. Yeah, the motion, everything you want.
Okay, I'm in favor of everything.
As amended.
Yeah, you should second that.
George, do you want to rephrase what you see as an appropriate motion?
Yeah.
It is to direct the city attorney to prepare and the city manager to execute an agreement with Caltrain for the Peninsula Corridor Electrification Project, with the caveat that it include information in it to the maximum extent possible that Caltrain will abide by or attempt to abide by the town's noise regulation, and keeping things quiet. Issue number 1, and issue number 2 is the pole height. That Caltrain will develop a process to assist the town in providing collaborative input into the pole height discussion.
In accordance with the EIR, and as Bill said, if it wasn't addressed in the EIR, then I think they need to come back to us.
That's state law.
Yeah. And council approval
On the pole height.
on the pole height
Yeah.
before execution of the PCEP, or just as a part of the process?
Well, I think we've asked for them to
I
come
think it's a part
back,
of the
so.
process.
Yeah, because we have to go ahead and
Okay,
approve this.
all right.
Well, I think if they agree in the agreement that it won't exceed the 30 feet, then we don't need to approve it.
Well, I don't think they'll do that, but then she's gotta go back and get the actual language that she can get approved. To go ahead.
And my only thing is that they be back for our next few public meetings to get just established report, nothing else.
I think we get that in an understanding, it doesn't have to be a motion. Right?
Right.
Stacy?
We'll be
She
back.
says yes.
Yeah, okay.
All the cameras are working,
Right.
we're good.
Okay,
Thanks.
so that's the motion. Did anybody choose to make that motion?
I
He
chose.
did, and he seconded.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay,
Okay.
good.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking the hot seat.
See you guys next time.
Okay, that should move us on to the rest of the regular agenda, beginning with item 16.
Mayor, members of council, with this, I'll turn it over to Mike Paschalagi, and who will make that presentation.
Yes, we have Nadia Boson here. We have a brief PowerPoint. Nadia Boson here is, we're gonna do a brief PowerPoint to go over this project. Council?
So my name's Nadia Bozan, I'm with Interwest Consulting Group. So I gave the same presentation on October 2nd for the public outreach meeting. The main difference is I've updated the schedule to reflect this meeting today. We also had a meeting at the BPAC on October 17th. And we were supposed to have an October 14th Transportation Committee, but that was canceled. We did some outreach efforts by sending postcards to every resident in the town. And we also talked with a neighboring jurisdiction, so San Mateo County, and then also Menlo Park, who also gave their feedback but weren't able to attend. We compiled all the notes with the designers, which is Mark Thomas, which can't be here today, but they were at the outreach meeting.
Nadia, I'm sorry, was Redwood City involved in this process?
Not in this one, since they're further out from San Mateo County. It's just the people that are immediately impacted by the ends of the limits. So that's why we wanted to contact Menlo Park, because Ravenswood and Ringwood would be impacted, and half of the road is actually under their jurisdiction. And then North Fair Oaks is under San Mateo County. So we contacted them and asked them who else we might need to contact, and they gave us the people that would be giving input for this project. So the project limits, as I was just saying, is from Jennings Lane in the North Fair Oaks area to Ravenswood Avenue. Initially, we were considering going to Ringwood, which was in the BPMP, but because of the fact that half of the road is under Menlo Park, it's been narrowed down to Ravenswood. Some of the improvements that were discussed by Mark Thomas were to to have the 5-foot minimum bike lanes. Initially, they were discussing 7-foot wide, but it was decided to limit it to 2 feet, and then to not have as much widening, because it would impact trees and other features that are on the side of the road. So this is the way of limiting the impact to one of the concerns, which was the residents, was the wall on the east side of the road. And if you look at the image that we have here, the dark hatch within the green is how far out they would be widening it to accommodate the 5-foot bike lanes. And this would not impact any of the trees in this area. So the main impact that we're going to be having is to the PG&E poles, but it wouldn't have any impact on the drainage structures or on the trees. We also wanted to include a 2-foot bike buffer between Encinal and Glenwood, because there's enough room in that area to accommodate it, and it's between Encinal School and Menlo Atherton High School. Some of the treatments that they were putting into the plans were the green lane bike lanes that go across the intersections and along the main road, Middlefield Road. We also discussed bike boxes and sharrows with them. And then we also wanted to include the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, the RRFB, at Glenwood to accommodate people that are crossing Middlefield Road. Initially, that was on the CIP as a standalone project, and we decided to include it in this project since it's going to be impacting that area. Am I pointing it at you, Teresa? Or over there? Up there, okay. Thank you. So this didn't work last time. I had to sit where she was to be able to accommodate it since she wasn't here, but thankfully she's here for this one. So some of the existing features that they wanted to focus on was Marsh Road, since the existing features there make the bicyclists cut in front, or the cars cut in front of the bicyclists. So now it's the responsibility of the cars to be aware of the bicyclists based on their new design. And then also they wanted to take into account the activity between the schools. So they went out, they surveyed the area, and they also went during school hours to assess how much pedestrian traffic there was through the area.
So, I know you talked about between Anson School and the high school, but the high school is actually at Oak Grove.
For the intersection, yeah, but it's a long
Yeah, so
Middlefield
you're
road.
gonna have the protected, on the other sheet, you're gonna have the protected lane, and it's for handling bike traffic, then it makes sense that you would go all the way to Oak Grove.
So that area, it's limited. So once I get to that slide, it'll show the layout. In that area, you're getting more into a tighter road, so it is impacting the existing features on the side of the road, which would require more tree impact poles. So basically, they said this is what we can do without impacting. Should we do more? And we wanted to limit the costs and also limit the impacts to the features that the residents were concerned of. So people came in to, yeah, sorry.
It wasn't clear to me, but I appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah,
for
of
the
course.
clarification.
So these are the features that they do want to limit impact. It's the poles, the drainage structures. This would be an exorbitant effort to change and modify it if we ended up making it even wider, the 7-foot detail that they were initially proposing. The poles would just mainly have a lead time impact. So you'd have to wait until PG&E comes out and moves their own poles. So that's a concern, but it's not as much a concern as removing trees and impacting drainage structures. This is the improvements that were already done at Oak Grove. So it's a current picture of the crossing details, the curb ramps, and then the left turn signal, etc. That has recently been done this summer. And then for people that were interested in knowing options that were at the public meeting, Mark Thomas suggested to include different methods of turning at intersections. If you look at one, it's for more experienced bikers where they would get in the left lane and then turn left with the signal with the vehicles behind in front of them. So they'd be moving with the traffic. The second option is to stay along the outside and then to move with the traffic, but more of in a corner, going straight and then going across the crossing direction. Then there's also a walking across, which is for the less experienced beginners. And this would be going to the pedestrian, push button, pushing it, walking across, and then doing it the same way, going the other direction. Another option is for Caltrans standard. It's to have a bike pocket, which basically, instead of using sharrows where they're with the vehicles, they're on the side of it, but the roads don't accommodate the width for having the Caltrans bike pocket. So this was something they wanted to show is available for some areas, but because of the limitations for our road widths, this has been eliminated.
I've seen a couple of those in Menlo Park.
In the park. Probably with wider intersections that you've seen it at? Yeah, so it's still basically for people that are more experienced. Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah, so
I think
it would,
for kids, for sure.
it'd definitely go with one, the first option.
Yeah, so your comment, people, on 2 charts ago, when you showed the, the 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
The people that are experienced would be the people that are doing the number 1, and they do it now anyway.
Yeah.
They look back, they stick their hand out, when the traffic's okay, they go. If they can't, then they wait till the light changes and then move out to the middle of the lane. So, I can't see putting a bunch of dots on the road for that, but 2 seems to be the right thing. Most people don't walk their bikes, even the kids in the bike lane. And so I think that can be problematic. I mean, if you go anywhere, people are they're riding their bikes for the most part, unless they're with mom, right? So 2 seems to be the right thing, but people who are experienced are going to do the one thing anyway.
Yeah, they don't want to get off their...
We're not going to preclude that.
Yeah. So they don't have any reason to dismount, so people that are more comfortable will just go in the left turn lane. So mainly the improvements that are suggested for the more experienced bikers would be the sharrows. It's not for the bikers, it's usually for the drivers to be aware that there's going to be someone in front of them or behind them, so they need to be alert. The dots are just showing the indication, but I know what you mean, like the actual pavement markings that are implemented. It's definitely for the drivers. But most of the improvements also need to go hand in hand with education. So even if we do put markers out, we need to make sure the cyclists and the drivers know how to use them. But making sure they're there first is key before you can actually educate people of what they are and how to use them. So examples of the sharrows, which we do have room for the more advanced bikers, would be putting sharrows along the left turn lanes. But I mean, as someone indicated, like the road is a little aggressive in Middlefield Road, so promoting more things to alert the drivers to slow down and be aware that there's bikers with them is the first part of making it safer. And then the bike boxes are another option, which whenever it's normally implemented at signals. This allows the bikers, once the light turns red, to be able to go in front of the bikers and not have to worry about navigating between lanes where they're not looking and then they inch forward and tap someone. So it's a way of giving it's a buffer basically for bikes to get in front of the cars and feel safer being the first to turn. Yep.
So on your picture, on the sharrows for the turn lane, all you're really doing is putting in like a sharrow in between the turn lanes for the cars. You're not precluding a car from being there.
Correct. Sharrows is just alerting because there's no room.
That's what you're proposing with this turn lane that you have up there, say going horizontally, okay, from the left to right.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you're
So
just going to put a bike thing there to make sure that as people are pulling up, they'll see, hey, there may be a bike here. It's just kind of a friendly reminder.
correct. So this example intersection, it shows both implementations, having sharrows on the main line because they probably didn't have enough width to accommodate bike lanes, or there's turning radius since it's an intersection at an angle. There might have been some turning issues at that location, which is why they probably had it at the side street as opposed to the main street. This is an example that was given to us from Mark Thomas, the designers. Doesn't really matter exactly where this is, but it is a good example of showing all of the improvements that can happen, which are the bike lanes dashed going through the intersection, the option of having sharrows, and then also the bike boxes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely just for alerting when you don't have the width or the turning radius for the bike box. Yeah.
That picture also shows exactly what happens with drivers. The confusion, should I enter it or should I not? You have one that's entering it and one that doesn't.
You're talking about that's a good, yeah.
I think we want to
So
make
that's
things as simple as possible.
That's definitely education right there. So but that's a good thing to point out.
So I understand that the proposal doesn't include any recommendation for the bike pockets. I think that's good.
Mm-hmm.
But where is the proposal for sharrows versus a bike box on
So
the middle field?
that's a later slide, and if it's not big enough, I also gave Teresa the plan so we can zoom in on that as well. The first part of the presentation is just going over what they're for and what improvements they were suggesting, and then it actually shows the layout.
Okay.
Yeah, did you?
So, I think we're gonna get to the next slide.
Mhm.
But the no turning on red on Middlefield, I think for me, seeing the traffic jams that's there in the morning and the evening, it's problematic. I understand that people I don't have any issue at all with the weight here like they've done on Laurel going onto Oak Grove.
Mm-hmm.
And Menlo Park has implemented that on that major bike lane that they've run from one location to another, one school to the other, but they still have right to turn on red.
You're talking about within Menlo Park where they were doing
Menlo
their
Park
Oak
on
Grove?
Oak Grove and
Yeah.
going down to Santa Cruz.
Mhm.
So But on your chart, you have a no turn on red, which I think could be problematic, especially on a heavily traveled street.
Oh, for the example that they gave, yeah. So this is just, a
Yeah,
figure.
these are just examples.
Yeah.
So let's.
Okay.
Well, this
Well, I thought
was-
this was the recommendation.
No, this is just to show how you use a bike box, not necessarily the signs around it. So they're just showing that this is only for signalized intersections, and this is to help cyclists turn left. So this is just what it looks like in a 3D image. And then two-stage key box is also another option. This is closer to the second version that they were talking about. This allows bicyclists, when they have a bike lane, to go and pull over, so they're out of the way of the bicyclists that are going through. And once the signal changes for the opposite direction, they're able to move perpendicular with the other direction of traffic. So it's just something that's new and implemented in some areas. It's not widely used. This was one of the first things they suggested with the 7-foot bike lanes. That was actually turned down, just because this definitely needs more education since this is even less likely used. They were considering it at Watkins, Encinal, and Ravenswood, but this would basically require to have more pavement off the side of the road so bicyclists can have a place to pull in. There'd be more green marking. It would just have more maintenance. So it's something that they wanted us to consider, but we said that it was not good to include.
Good choice, good decision.
Okay. And then this is typically on the far side of an intersection, which is how they pull off, but it's not used by Menlo Park and San Mateo County. And so this is the layout. If you guys don't have a presentation, do you have the layout in front of you?
Small
Yeah,
version.
small version.
Looks like 90 kg.
Okay. Yeah. So if we need it bigger, then we can have Teresa pull up the layouts. But mainly, this is the one with the line work. At the outreach meeting, we had 2 boards being displayed. We had one with the line work and one with the actual like gray for road and green for the pavement markings. It was more of a finish rendering. And it basically gave the public a chance to come up, see it in person, mark it up, and we used those markups to include in the meeting minutes. So we had input from the public. They were proposing the bike boxes at multiple locations, but they narrowed it down to Encinal and Ravenswood because of the turning radius. These areas would accommodate turning radius without issues, while other areas were too narrow. Like Oak Grove, for example, the public came and they wanted to have bike boxes near the school because they were concerned for the high school students. But after discussing with Mark Thomas, it would require the southbound bike box to be pulled back, I think shorter distance than the northbound, but the northbound was like 20 feet. So basically the cars would be really far back because they currently are really far back for the stop line. So this would be even further back because it would have to accommodate that bike box. Yep.
How many public were at the meeting?
It was very small, but it was about 8 people. So yeah, so it went out to all the people, the residents. I was talking to, I think, Judy, and she said that's typical, but when I go to public meetings, I feel like that's actually typical when there's a few people that come and then the rest of them message you later. So I had a lot of people email me afterwards that we told to come to the BPAC or the TC meeting, and we did have a couple people come back to the BPAC meeting. But yeah, there was 8 people. Do you have any questions on the layout?
Yeah, so if I understand the proposal, you've got bike lanes on both sides of the road that have the green markings when they come to the intersections.
Yep.
And for the intersections of Encinal and Ravenswood, you're recommending bike boxes?
Mark Thomas was recommending bike boxes, yeah.
And what about Marsh?
Marsh, they initially included that, and when I was reviewing it, they include the turning movements. So there was a lot of.
There's no slide on that coming up?
What?
Is there a slide on that coming up?
For Marsh,
The
yeah,
bike pocket.
but not with the bike boxes. Yeah, it's just
Bike pocket.
the bike pocket.
That's
Let's see.
that's what your presentation shows.
What's coming up then, I don't need to go through it.
So yeah, we'll get to that and we'll discuss it then. So let's move forward. So this is just showing the buffered bike lanes between Encinal and Glenwood. Did you have another question?
Just very basic.
Yeah.
Will you explain to me what exactly that means by buffered? What does buffer mean exactly?
Buffer is just having space, like
No curb, just.
No.
space. Yeah. So like,
Right.
yeah, in the terms for pavement markings, it's just having the lines to have a sense of safety. So we have like a 2-foot striped buffer for this.
Okay.
It could be in terms for other ways too. You can have delineators, which would be like physical poles coming out of the ground. But for this case, it's just pavement markings that are being the buffers.
So since we're talking about pavement marking,
Mhm.
the type of paint on the pavement, do you know what I'm getting at?
No, we don't.
Well,
Surprise.
some people tell me that it's slippery.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
It's very dangerous.
Mhm.
I've been getting yes and yes. So, so we just, we're not ready to put paint on the ground yet, but we did at Oak Grove intersection. But I just wanna make sure that we really look at that and we do the proper applications so that when it gets wet, that it doesn't make dangerous conditions for bikes.
Yeah.
Because we wanna make it safe for bikes, and I've heard that a lot of these green stripes are being painted with paint that when it gets wet, it's slick.
You're correct. There are certain types of treatment that aren't appropriate for bicyclists, but there are also some that are. That's something that's been widely talked about for people that are implementing bike lanes. So it is a topic that Mark Thomas is aware of. I think we actually discussed it initially in the beginning when I think it was also discussed at the Oak Grove project as well. People that design these are aware of that issue.
Well, we painted our bike sharrows and the application had unintended consequences that has made the bike sharrows unappealing and not very well received by our residents because, so I just don't want to, I just want to be very, very cautious going forward that if and when we get to a point where we start doing some of this stuff, that we don't make
The same mistake.
If
Of course,
I could just write on that, or follow up on that. It may seem like a small thing, it's actually a fairly big issue. It's one of the most common things people talk to me about when we go around town.
Yeah.
And we had experts tell us that the thermoplasty we were using was the right thing to use, and it wasn't.
It really wasn't.
So, it just wasn't.
Yeah.
It did not go well. It's still badly received. It's been what, a year or two?
It's not wearing well.
It's been 2 years and I'm still getting complaints about it.
Okay.
So just to be aware, it seems like a small thing. It's actually a big issue in this town historically.
So what we could do is take note and find out what was used and bring it up to Mark Thomas, and that way when they do their spec, they can include something that they have seen as best use.
I'd like to approve that.
Yes, so that, yeah, we'll have the 65% and the 95%, and then we can have them have something included in that so that you know what's being put in the plans.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, so, what we put down before was laminate, and we don't wanna have the
It
laminate.
was thermoplastic.
It was thermoplastic.
Okay.
Thermoplastic makes,
Alright, so,
yeah.
my other comment, I got two comments, so, looking at your layout of the middle field as you're going from Encinal to Middlefield, and then the kids, there are kids that live in Menlo Park, down Oak Grove and beyond, okay, that will be going south on Middlefield, and there's no crosswalk there. So you have the crosswalk going across Middlefield, which definitely is needed. However, there needs to be some sort of crosswalk, just paint on the ground for them to go from the north end of Middlefield to the south end of Middlefield. As they're riding their bikes, they shouldn't have to ride and go across and then be across the grade to get down to go past MA High School.
So I want to make sure I'm oriented the right way. You're talking about between Encinal and Oak Grove, correct?
Going from Encinal to Oak Grove, crossing Glenwood.
Okay, so Glenwood's actually, one of the parts that we've included, that independent project for the
Yeah.
rectangular flap,
We
sorry,
just need to be
rectangular
able to cross
flashing
two
beacon.
ways. You gotta cross from north to south, and you gotta cross from east to west.
Yes,
Okay.
so that's the
And on your
rectangular,
Well, your drawing only shows going east to west. It does not show the north to south.
so that's something that's newly implemented. This is one of the original plans. I think if you can, we'll do it actually after. At the end, we'll bring up the rendering, and I'm pretty sure it has the symbol, and at that point, they'll have crossing. That's part of the point of putting in the rectangular rapid flashing beacon is also to have a safer crossing, so there'll be a pavement marking going across at that intersection too.
The flashing beacon, and Marty and I have talked about it,
Mhm.
and we talked about it on the at the BPAC,
Mhm.
was to go across Middlefield. I don't think you need it, because Glenwood is a stop sign. All you need is a crosswalk painted down.
Yeah,
My other comment was, how much is all this gonna cost?
okay. So it's-
Because we're adding pavement, we're putting down paint, so what's are you gonna get to what the bottom line is?
That's what they're gonna have to define. So Mark Thomas, I know we have a budget for it, but they have to take into account all of the changes that we brought to them. Also the inclusion of the Glenwood project, and that they're gonna have to tell us how much it costs. Yeah. So once we know, they're gonna give us a plan for the 65%. We can also discuss it then and take things out or put things in. But this is just the concept level to know what we're looking for, and then they can refine it after that once we know the cost.
Okay, nothing over 45 feet tall.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not the designers, but we will make sure the designers are very clear with what their prevent stunting says. Did you have any more questions?
No, did you finish all your slides?
I think there's still a couple, like 3 more.
Let's keep
How many miles is it?
The speed, I think there's 2 different speed zones in this.
Miles.
Oh, miles. Oh, distance, I'm sorry. I actually didn't
From the step. It's about 1.6 miles from one end of Atherton to the other.
Yeah, it seems like it's under 2
It's only
miles.
1.6 miles?
It's about
That says-
1.6 miles.
That's what El Camino is.
Yeah.
That's what I always use for El Camino.
That would make sense.
Oh,
It's like a square going down and then it bottles up. Yeah. So I think we already discussed this, the 2-foot wide striped buffer. Doing this, we can put the buffer in without impacting trees or drainage structures. It's only going to impact the PG&E poles. And this area is high activity for students. So this is the layout for Marsh Road that we briefly discussed. It doesn't have the bike box for the southbound movement. So the way we've been oriented is Middlefield Road is north-south. So the southbound is going to the right of the drawing. And what they've changed now, if you see the green striping, before you see the gray is what it is currently, where the bicyclists have to cut in front, and now the cars have to maneuver around the bicyclists as opposed to the bicyclists being forced to be aware of the cars.
So are you talking about then having something like on Alpine Drive when it comes up to Foothill or Junipero Serra?
I think I need to see that to say yes or no.
That's a green striped, a long green striped section where there's a merge.
But they let the cars come in, but it's about 10 or 15 feet down from the corner, and the
Does-
cars
Where
come in.
it's dotted.
Yeah.
Does it look like a pocket like this one does, where they're being forced to go around the striping?
Yes.
So then, yes.
So,
Yeah, so before it was just a straight, or right now, it's a straight line across, which kind of has a crossing movement, it's a little more dangerous. This now has the bikes going straight, and the cars have to get into the lane that they want to get into to take a right.
we're talking about widening the road?
This isn't widening. This is any kind of widening we have is on the west side of the road. So to do that, it's widening only between Marsh and where these trees are impacted. So we're shifting everything to the west side. That's mainly because there's more poles on the west side and there's more trees on the east side. So you can see like 1 foot for 64 feet to the north side, and then for 235 it's 3 feet. I think 4 feet is the max widening. It's just so tiny, sorry. I think it's about max within any area is about 4 feet.
Because what happens after it stops being wide?
What's variable? Can I make a comment on this before we leave this slide?
Yeah.
It doesn't quite show on this slide, but if you keep going north, you'll come to Fair Oaks.
Yep.
And on Fair Oaks, which is a little bit difficult to see on the prior slide, you show a crosswalk going north-south across Fair Oaks, but not.
East-west, across, okay.
No, north-south across Fair Oaks, not across Marsh.
Okay.
You show a crosswalk in your image going across Fair Oaks, but my comment is, I think you also need one going across Marsh at Fair Oaks, because there will be people coming on the bike lane here, going north, crossing Marsh, and come down to Fair Oaks, and they'll need to go up Fair Oaks. And if you don't have a crosswalk, it will be very difficult for the unexperienced cyclist to get across that street. It's very busy right there.
There's actually two Fair Oaks, Middlefield, you're talking about that.
That's what I thought, yeah. It was like Fair Oaks and Marsh.
It's not like Marsh and Middlefield, and Marsh and Fair Oaks.
Two Fair Oaks. So I'm talking about.
Fair Oaks intersects with
Middlefield and Fair Oaks.
Marsh.
No, I'm talking from Marsh to Fair Oaks on Middlefield.
Yeah, right.
So right here, we see the intersection of Middlefield and Marsh,
It's by Rick.
and it's been a well-designed, I understand there's a pocket there, and why there's a pocket there, notwithstanding the previous comments about the pocket being a difficult thing for people to navigate in this case.
This is a through
because
pocket,
of
yeah.
the danger that currently exists where the cyclist has to cross the traffic. I think this is an intelligent decision. And you're showing the northbound cyclist going across Marsh, continuing into, you can see where it's dotted green on the other side of Marsh, that's approaching Fair Oaks. When it comes to Fair Oaks, there will be cyclists that need to go left and go up Fair Oaks, and right now there's not a proposed crosswalk.
In front of Jack
painted.
Ringham's house there.
Right. Yeah, and I think we need that painted crosswalk
That needs-
across Middlefield.
I had a resident tell me that is the most dangerous intersection getting in and out of all of Alberton, Middlefield, to Fair Oaks to turn left or to turn left into. So, you know, they need a little.
Just so I have a good understanding for when I talk with them.
Yeah.
Marsh is here.
Right.
Are you saying Fair Oaks is north, in North?
Yes,
No,
north.
Fair Oaks is on that.
The street, North Fair Oaks.
It's right there,
Marsh.
upper right there,
This
right,
one?
exactly, that's
This
right
is
there.
Palmer.
On the other side. On one side.
It's up there, no, it's up on the right, up where you have the crosswalk, right there, that's a crosswalk going across Fair Oaks. And I'm saying you need a crosswalk perpendicular to that going across
On
Middlefield.
the east side, going
That's
north.
exactly right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
When they don't walk beacon.
Alright, so I think we're almost done with the slides. Let's see. So this is the last slide. This is just updating the schedule of when they anticipate to be done with the plans. Right now, we just adjusted it so that we can have the BPAC and the TC and the City Council look over the plans. So basically, we're still aiming for January for 65%, and then March for the 95%. So construction, if we do go to construction, would be in the summer, once everything's been accepted and approved by the town. Some of the things to note from the BPAC meeting, they were concerned with the Oak Grove intersection for vehicles on Oak Grove taking a right going south on Middlefield Road. So they suggested for Mark Thomas to look into a safer way of alerting the drivers that they are having, there's a class 1 there, and that the bikes are crossing going towards the school, so going east across Middlefield Road. So I want to make sure that you guys are aware of that, and if you also agree that it should be looked into. Right now, it's new, so they think that one of the members of the BPAC is a bicyclist, and he goes in that area. He just said that it's apparent that the drivers aren't aware that there's bicyclists crossing as well when they turn on the red line.
So on your schedule, the schools start with the last week in August.
Mhm.
And so if there's anything can be done, if we were to stick to this schedule, you know, starting in the summertime, you wanna do as much construction when
Beforehand.
school's out, right?
Yeah.
Because Middlefield is very heavily traveled, and during school time, it's very heavily traveled.
Yeah.
Alright, so, we don't wanna do it in April, because that's when we do our audit for the trash, and we do not wanna be negatively impacted,
True.
because that audit could increase our trash rates, so.
I doubt we'll expedite the schedule. It's the summer planning, we rarely go faster than that.
Just have to be careful of those two things.
So I think that's a good comment, because if I read it right now, it's showing construction from the end of July to the beginning of October. And, you know, we did a very significant construction project on Marsh Road last year. And the only reason it worked as well as it did was we really planned it to do it in the summer. So that the school traffic would, you know, was minimally impacted. And this is a big school corridor, so I think if there's any way you can move this construction up a couple weeks so that it's done by the time school goes back, that's a big deal.
I think I think the solids are things that impact the schedule. One of the key things that we need to take note is the PG&E poles. So once we have the layout clarified from the 65, 95% final, then they can actually have PG&E notified. So if the review can be shortened, that would be the key in order to have the summer construction schedule moved earlier. I'm not sure how easy that is to accommodate. Might have to talk to Mark Thomas, because they not only have to design it, which takes time, but then we also have to internally review it and then also bring it to City Council, which has its own monthly time as well. So I can bring this up to them. You're asking for it to be around what time, what month instead?
It needs to be finished by mid-August.
Before,
That'd be
yeah.
the ideal.
Before school starts.
Start sometime like mid-May, okay?
Yeah, so
After our trash audit.
I think that makes it difficult just because of the 95% and then final bid documents by May 8th. So at that point, you still have to go for advertisement, and that is a whole month. So it's very tight already, but we can tell them and see what they can accommodate. But we don't want them to shorten their design, because you don't want to have a bad design also. But yeah, I'll definitely let them know, and then they're very accommodating and they're very good with communication, so we could see what they can do and let you know. But we'll be back in January, so we'll definitely know by then. Do we open it to the public?
We
Or?
do open it. I think
Okay.
there's a couple numbers you would like to say. Do you
Okay.
have the public like to comment on what we just heard? Ms. Crowley.
I thank you for, and thanks to the town of Atherton for all the, clearly there's a lot of time and thought and investment going into bike infrastructure, and I thank you. I guess I have two questions, and one of them is about the Marsh Road thing, because my background, I'm an elite cyclist. I raced professionally, like I can ride really fast. I took the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition Street Skills course when I first got into riding my bike around. That was like 10 years ago. And so I feel pretty comfortable in a lot of scenarios, like taking the lane, and I can ride 20 miles and 25 miles an hour for short periods of time. And the Marsh Road intersection there, is mostly comfortable when it's clogged, right? Because that just limits the traffic speeds, and to something that even I can do, right? If it's something that I can't do, then most other people can't either, right? And I actually find it okay when traffic is relatively light, because there's really good line of sight. Like cars, I'm wearing fluorescent booties, I have daytime running lights, like you can't miss me unless you're texting. And so people can, if they're paying attention, they see me from a really long ways away, and I signal a couple times over my shoulder, and they almost always, like, we have a nice friendly merge, and then I'm in the bike lane and they're on my right side and they're onto the freeway in their heads. And so this design makes me a little bit nervous because there's like a visual barrier, not like there isn't a physical barrier, but like the demarcation. And so it sort of almost feels like, as a cyclist, and it might be better when it's built and I might change my mind, but just looking at it makes me feel like I'm popping out into traffic and surprising people. And so I don't know if that's something that your engineers can kind of take a look at and evaluate whether or not that.
Do you mind explicitly saying?
Yeah.
You feel confident?
So like this part right here, I'm all of a sudden I'm like in a road, and these cars are gonna just be like this, cutting across my lane of travel. Like, so physically, the bikes and the cars do have to crisscross, right? And so I'd rather have it be a really long ways. People can see me from really far away, and that feels like I'm popping out into traffic. Whereas right now, it actually feels like I'm basically already in the lane, because we have a narrow bike lane and the cars are right there, and we're all pretty aware of each other.
Do you feel like currently it feels safer?
It doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't feel safe. It's one of the 3 scariest places I ride. And I go through there frequently because I volunteer at the Rikers Center. So I go from Menlo School to Rikers and back and forth. So that makes me nervous. And the only other quick thing is heading north, trying to make a left turn onto Encinal. There's a light, and I pulled there, but there's no bike indicator. And so I sat there with cars going this way and cars going that way until I said, oh, shoot. So I went over to the crosswalk.
I'm just trying to know for Encinal. So you're saying taking a left turn onto Encinal from Middlefield?
From Middlefield when you're heading north. When I was in that left turn lane, because again, I feel comfortable riding there, there's no bike signal, so I sat there for a full cycle of the light before I realized it wasn't going to recognize that I was there.
Should do trip the sensor.
Yeah.
Is there one there?
Yeah, you're saying there wasn't a bike sensor there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's a good point.
So that's all. Thank you though for all of the time.
Thank you very much.
There's an optical sensor there. It's not like Fair Oaks and El Camino, where they're actually in the ground and we have sweet spots marked for bicycles to park on. That's an optical that should be seeing you.
Oh, it didn't pick me
So,
up, yeah.
and that's possible once in a while, but it should pick you up. I mean, most of the time, I've sat there and watched the screens and they pick up a bicycle, so sometimes
should,
you just
yeah.
move a little bit or it'll find you.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
You have a carbon fiber bike? That can hurt too. Likes metal.
Steel is real. Okay, any other comments from the public on this issue? Yes.
Hi, my name is Matt Chen. I actually came from one of the later items, but since Councilwoman Lewis brought up, that intersection at Fair Oaks and Middlefield is very busy, and in the morning, the only hope you have of making a left is that marsh is so backed up at the intersection that then you can hope to get across. So I do suggest you take a look at that intersection.
That's like east-west across Middlefield.
Yeah, or either way, because it's just like you just hope that marsh is backed up, because then at least one lane is stopped. Otherwise, you're never getting across.
Coming off of, Palmer.
Right, and Fair Oaks. I do that almost every other day. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, any other comments from the public? If not, then we're ready to council. Comments from council?
A couple.
Please.
One, have we engaged the fire district and have the police department, are you involved in this at all? As far as your input related to the safety measures and implementation?
Not really.
Yeah, department's input should be key in this, especially if the fire district have a comment zone. Secondarily, I imagine if we're touching PG&E poles, the amount of notification, because how much that's gonna screw up just the traffic element alone. So how much outreach, Marty, do we do on the Marsh Channel project? How many months prior to that project?
I was not part of Marsh. I don't know if Mike, you would know.
Well, I think that if we're gonna do something, because this is, I mean, huge, if we're touching poles and this and that along that whole corridor, I think that we have to, you know, take into consideration, maybe there needs to be a considerable amount of active input to make sure notification to everybody out there at this period of time as we move forward along that component, traffic's gonna be hell, because it will be.
So, I know Sergeant.
I'm sorry, briefly, please, we're trying to move this forward.
Of course. I know you were at the BPAC meeting, but if we need to have more communication with the police department, we can of course have something more formal. And then also with input.
Fire district, absolutely.
Yeah, so we can also talk with the person who was in charge of Marsh Road project and find out what his outreach efforts were for us. We can redo it for this project as well.
Yeah, I know that,
Yeah,
that's
there
a
was
very common comment that nobody includes them or us, arguably, but definitely the fire district, because that's a primary response route.
Yeah, of course.
Other comments? Did you get sufficient guidance?
Good.
No action necessary. Thank you very much. Should I move on to item 7?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This one is a review of plans for proposed clay tennis court in Overcomer Park to provide staff inspection regarding its acceptance and use, together with an extension of the agreement with Player Capital Tennis. It also involves an extension of the actual agreement with Player Capital, I think you said that, as well as a recommendation on modification of fee prices or maintenance obligations. But Steve, you're up.
Mayor, members of the council, before you is the request for an addition of one of the 6 courts that are currently part of the Holbrook Palmer Park tennis facility to be turned into a clay tennis court. That would be what is considered court number 3 right now, which would be if you were standing at the Little League field, if you were looking out farthest one to the back left. In April, the Park and Recreation Committee was approached by Player Capital Tennis, Michael Jessup, who's here tonight, and they had secured or had received interest for a donation of this court to the town by a group of people, including some town residents as well as people from outside the town, to turn one of the courts into a clay tennis court, something that is lacking for a public facility in this area. And Michael can explain that a little bit. So I told Michael we would need something concrete, such as a plan. We can't just bring an idea in, even though he had a Saviano Incorporated, who is proposing to build this court for the town, has built a number of courts, including the Beijing Olympics. I mean, these guys are the best. So, but anyways, they hired a consultant or an architect who's also here tonight, and they put together a plan. And once the plan was done and it started looking good, we brought it back to Park and Rec and said, let's talk about an agreement. Michael and I went over what some of those gives and takes would be on the agreement. We talked about hours. We talked about if there would be any price increases, who would be allowed to use the court, and that's all contained within the staff report. So I'd like to bring Michael up here and answer any questions that you might have in regards to accepting this donation of a tennis court. One thing that is not in the staff report, and I apologize for that, was the price. What is the donation value of this court? And it's about $100,000 to convert this court. It would be built directly over the asphalt court that's there now. It would not be removed. It could go right in. So any questions you might have, we'll answer.
So Steve, I'm sorry, Rita, I think we had a question already.
Well, I could ask you one. Why would this, you said Saviano is wanting to build it? Is that the donor?
Is that still true?
No, he's
Oh,
not building.
they're just the
no.
construction guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I was
They,
going, why would
they
this
do all
be
the
on
clay
the-
courts in the area.
But it is a private donor?
Yeah, private,
Is it
a couple
one
private donors.
entity or what?
A couple private donors, but one major one and then a few
Mm-hmm.
minor ones. The Rogeron family. They're the major ones, yeah.
All tennis players.
Yeah, all tennis players, yeah. But it's basically, you know, clay courts are at a premium. Like, there's not very many, and this would actually be the first one in Northern California at a public facility, the only one.
Really?
Yeah, they're, you know, they're kind of connected with prestige. If you have a clay court, that's like, it's pretty cool. Like, there's not many people with it, so, you know, it add a lot to the park.
There goes the parking in the park. I mean,
Luckily,
you'll
there's
never
only
be
one
able to,
court.
Go to park again, right?
Exactly. But yeah, but it helps out with, you know, the two main demographics. There's going to be definitely people that like it just for, you know, the novelty to come and play, residents. But the two major ones are actually the ones that are 50 plus, because it's a lot softer on your joints and stuff, and it, the longevity that you can play is a lot longer. One of the big proponents is Bob Rosser, you know, because he's out there a couple times a week, and so he's excited for it. And then also the younger kids learning to play on it, it helps develop their balance and stuff versus a hard court. So there's a lot less impact on the body with the clay court. So it's gonna be pretty cool.
My friend plays also a little slower.
Can you focus a little bit on the maintenance component, the damage longevity of what a clay court takes versus a regular court, and what's the risk of damaging the court, like for example, grass versus clay versus regular? What's the repair method? Do you have to hire somebody to come in and repair it?
Yeah, so
Try to focus on that and longevity.
yeah, so basically you need to, the first year it's built, you need to have them come back twice to redo the court. After that, it's basically once a year, and then there's also daily maintenance, which Player Capital is going to take care of the daily maintenance. You know, just making sure it's swept, the lines are cleaned, and stuff. So that's pretty much, it's pretty basic, the daily maintenance, just raking the court, that type of thing.
How about damage? If I'm on my skateboard, not that anybody ever would, nor would they ever, you know, bicycle.
Yeah.
What's the risk?
There's less damage on a clay court than a hard court. Like right now, actually, it's a great thing because court 3 is our worst court. It's all cracked and everything because the courts were laid down with no foundation. So, you know, the dirt around here has a lot of clay, so it moves, it cracks. So every year we've got to, you know, we resurface the courts, and 3 months later the cracks are back. So clay doesn't crack, which is really nice. And there's very little damage that can happen because, you know, if you take a scoop of clay out, then you can just replace the clay. You know, whereas a hard court, if someone goes on the surface and skids out on it, it leaves permanent markings, and, you know, it can get divots in it, and you can't replace that on a hard court.
So you mentioned once a year there's a maintenance. What's that cost? Right?
That's $2,500 a year.
So that's to come in, do whatever, like, almost like a resurfacing?
Well, they basically kind of lay a new layer of clay on it, kind of level it a little, and then they roll it, like heavy duty roll it, so that, you know, it compacts the clay.
Kind of like they do with the Little League field. They nail drag it and then get it all back even again, add clay to the low spots that aren't there, and then roll it out, compact it again. And the lines are set in permanently in kind of a plastic material.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's kind of neat the way that works.
Those were my concerns of longevity and use. I mean, obviously you got use covered, but just to try to figure out what the maintenance cost
Yeah,
is.
they actually last a lot longer than hard courts. So.
Ask a question, which is, there's a reason this is the only clay court in public use in Northern California.
Right.
Why, clearly, the other 8,000 communities in Northern California have looked at this at some time. Why is it not? Why are clay courts not all over the place if they're cheaper and faster?
They're
and
not.
better and
Clay
slower?
courts are just the clay court alone's about $80,000, and the hard court's maybe 35 or 40.
For a singular court.
No, I understand that.
So, so that's why, because public facility, you could have a court for half the price. So you could have 2 courts versus 1. So that's why there's very few clay courts. Plus, you have to do the daily maintenance. Whereas a hard court, you could have it at a park. That's, you know, nobody has to manage it. It just sits there, and, you know, you don't have to have anybody actively take care of it.
Well, it seems, you know, Vice Mayor, really has been pushing you about the maintenance costs and everything, but it seems from the staff report, you've kind of figured out a way to help pay for that.
Right.
Do you wanna explain that a little bit more to us?
So basically, the cost of the upkeep, so for the residents of Atherton, the key prices are going to go up by $50, which is still they might be able to, yes, exactly. But they're going to get free use of the clay court in exchange. So that's a great thing, you know, like Atherton's.
If we're charging them an extra $50, it's not actually free use.
Okay, yeah, an extra $50 a year. Yeah, so it's not free. So they're going to be paying an extra $50
What about
a year.
the non-residents?
The non-residents are going to be paying an hourly rate, so that they're going to be paying $30 an hour for court usage of it, and that's the money that we're going to use to pay for the daily
Do you think
maintenance.
that there will be a demand for that?
Yes.
How do we know that revenue is guaranteed to?
We don't know, but that's kind of in the contract that we're taking care of that.
So we went over that too a little bit at Park and Rec, and the fact is the courts are used now way more than they were 5 years ago. We have a lot more programs, but there's still a lot of empty court time out there, and to do this to one of the courts, and if you know the usage wasn't that great, there'll still be empty asphalt courts out there. It's not like people are waiting for all 6 of those courts all the time. So I don't see that, or it didn't seem to be that there was too big a concern.
The revenue, is Player Capital going to pick up the slack?
Yeah, Player Capital is taking care of the daily maintenance.
The daily maintenance, but the additional annual maintenance that we're looking at,
Right.
that if there's a shortfall in the additional key fees and the hourly rates to rent the courts, that would actually roll back and come out of our budget, right?
If we're definitely, we based all our figures and the financial analysis on this on today's court usage, not the current court usage, not changing. Fact is, every year we've kind of added a few more keys, so it appears to be trending that way. To
So
stay
my
on this word.
understanding is that for the non-Atherton residents, they'll pay $30 an hour. That fee will go to Player Capital.
Correct.
And that's what you will use to cover your costs for daily maintenance.
Correct.
For the annual maintenance, it's contemplated that would come from the increase in the Atherton key price, which is currently $50, and the proposal is to move it to $100. And if we don't lose key holders, that's 78 key holders, so we'll have about $4,000.
Right. And
price increase.
yeah, and the court costs about $6,000 every 3 years. So $2,000 a year each court costs in resurfacing fees too. So it's almost a wash, because each court costs $2,000 a year. So this is $2,500. So you're really only having to make up $500. So you're probably going to be in the black.
But we've got other added expenses such as water. There is water usage that is associated with this, and we've got a calculation in there about how much it will be annually. The only way we could come up with, the Park and Rec Committee asked about that, is there is a clay court in use here in the town right now that was put in pretty recently. It would have the same hydration system underneath it that court uses. Now, being that's a private court, it only costs uses about 400 gallons a month.
A week.
A week, 400 gallons a week. We'll have much more usage than that court will, so it'll take more water to hydrate.
That is using the well water.
So there will be some incremental costs in our well to run that water, the electricity to pump it, which will come out of part of that
So,
$2,500.
was there any thought given, I mean, look, first off, not every Atherton resident is gonna use that, or even is interested in using the courts. Yet we're doubling their fee for use of the a public fee, court. And so, I'm concerned that we're just gonna double it. When, I supported having little to no cost for it, for Atherton residents to have the keys. So if there are residents like Bob that want to use it, then he can opt up and pay the $100. But if somebody doesn't want to use it, then they should be able to just say, I want to stay at $50. Forcing people to buy, to double their fee for a key, I think is inappropriate when they may not get the benefit from it. Plus, when you look at the times when they're going to be able to use it, all right? Many of the people were working, so yes, there are some generous times between 8 and 2 p.m. for retired folks to use the court. But on Saturday and Sunday when they're home, there's no time for them really, other than when your people are taking lunch. Or after 6 o'clock, which, in the evening now, it's obviously is no good. So my concern is that first off, I think on Saturday and Sunday we could use a little more time. And I think that the residents need to do you have an opt up as opposed to, or an opt out to keep their rates the same. I'm concerned about the water usage, and as Councilwoman Lewis brought up, if the usage isn't there, then of course we've got $2,500 to $5,000 to cover. So, I would say let's say a nominal figure of $2,000 in your $40,000 fee and make it $42,000. Then we have some investment in there, but not 100% investment. And so, those are things that I'm concerned about. I'm also concerned, again, for the water. And I don't care if it comes from a well or whatever, it's still a natural resource. All right? So water is water. You'd have to run a line from the well over there because there's only potable water next to the courts. So there is going to be some additional expenses. There may be some time as we do this. If we go down the road with the water retention pond, to have a purple pipe run from the water retention there and cover that, and I'd be all in favor of that because that's just runoff. But the water is an issue for me. The resident fee, not being able to opt up, but just taking it out of their hands. Many of the people aren't going to want to play on that, and that's the input I've gotten from a number of residents. And they don't want to pay more. And then the maintenance fee. So, but I think we can easily cover that by increasing the $40,000 to $42. Those are my comments.
I will say I hear exactly what Bill's saying. As a former tennis player that slowed down a little bit, it's probably my pace because I understand it's slower. It'll be easier on my knees. If there's a way to track maybe with Bill's suggestion and maybe with, I know that they're going to always want to try it. It's just the nature of the habit. You're going to say, I want to try it even though I don't pay for it. I don't want to try it. But maybe there's a way of saying if a resident says they really don't want, but you may want to try it, to do a resident fee at $50 but $10 a rental. That they want to try it, they're going to pay for it, but ultimately they may make the consideration that I'm going to end up paying $100 anyways. That may be something to consider in that, but I do think that it's something that, as a cost factor, it seems like maintenance-wise is going to be pretty similar, other than the cost of the watering and maintenance component overall. But my concern would only be if you weren't there. So as long as we have a good agreement.
Well, when developing that fee of raising the Atherton rate from $50 to $100, Michael and I talked about that a lot. We felt it was a real important component to make that available to all the Atherton residents, if possible, free of charge, whoever wanted to use it, and as well as non-residents, making that court available to all that wanted to use it, and revenue neutral for the town. And the best place to get that money was, there's 12 non-resident key holders and there's 76 resident key holders, so really the resident key holders were the place. So we talked about that. Michael's opinion was the $50 key charge right now is nobody that he knows of is at that price range.
This is the lowest price of any, like Menlo Park is I think, what is it, 125 a year. Sunnyvale, Fremont, all of them are 10 times the amount. I mean, there's no, you can't buy this. It's just $11 an hour. If you're playing once a week, you know, or once a month even, you're way above that. I mean, Atherton's rates are the lowest, probably one of the lowest in the California. So,
And then we only got input from the tennis users that were on the Park and Rec committee, but they said that that was not a deal buster for them. You know, whether they used it a couple times to try it or used it once in a while to see how it went or whatever, it wasn't that big an issue. So just letting you know how we came up with that fee and why it's there, and that was the place to go with it.
So Steve, our rates used to be higher, and then we dropped them down. What was the increase in keys when we did that?
Yeah, they went up a little bit.
But then we also, you know, got an operator.
Yeah.
You know, that's made it a lot better and more fun to, you know, it's more cared for, and I think people really like going.
And we feel that this will help maybe bring out key holders too. Wow, I can play on a tennis court, made it creative.
Can I make
Yeah,
a,
please.
so here's my opinion. I have been on council a long time, and I have seen council debate like this, nickels and dimes and this and everything, in the face of having, trying to decide whether or not to accept a gift. A gift.
I'm happy to accept the gift. I'm just not happy to charge the residents.
Well, I think your philosophical opinion about not charging the residents to play on the court is well intended. However, in the reality of the world, residents do pay for those privileges. I lived in Menlo Park, and I would buy the tennis keys, and it was more. I mean, this was years ago now. This was 20 years ago, and I know that we paid over $100 a year to use Menlo Park's tennis courts. So I think that's kind of being short-sighted. Do we have? I just want to know: are there any other strings attached to the gift of the court? The installation. I know that we have to do the maintenance. It's sort of like the gift of Caltrans giving us the gift of the stormwater, right?
There is.
Right?
There is another string attached.
There is
So
okay.
the donors have requested, being they're doing this under good faith with the town and also through Michael's Player Capital Tennis, who they believe in and they like investing with, and they like Michael's program, that they would like to see Michael's contract expires for the first 3-year term and the second 3-year term in September. So part of this is asking that he be accepted for those next 3 years as part of this agreement. They want to make sure that this doesn't get done, the courts get built, and we go to another tennis vendor in September. They would like to know that if they're going to invest this money, Michael will be given another 3-year term here. So there's a string.
Okay.
There's a string, but
Right.
that's the only one.
I would think that's kind of what we would expect up here. I mean, we're not.
I know,
We've
yeah,
been doing a
because-
fabulous job, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's not really a string. I mean, they wanted to rename the tennis courts, after themselves or whatever. I think that would be a little strange.
Are the donor, I'm sorry, but the donor family, are they serious tennis players who are training for something big?
Yeah, well, the daughter is she plays a lot of tennis.
So the clay court is a competitive advantage. That experience training here is a big deal for a serious tennis player who wants to play
Yeah,
internationally.
definitely it is, and it's just softer on the body too to
No,
avoid
I
injury. Yeah.
understand. Because one of the things, everybody said what a great job you done. I don't disagree with that. I've had an issue consistently, which I know you're aware of, that I'm concerned that the courts are becoming more focused on experienced tennis players and serious tennis players, and less on the recreational tennis player. In case I know, for example, the story of a 9-year-old girl who wanted to come up and play and was actively discouraged from playing, a town resident, and that bothers me. I mean, I think the purpose of a public tennis court is to have public participation, and I don't want this to become a fulcrum for, this is where the great tennis players come to play, and only the great tennis players come to play, because it's the only clay court in the area. And if you're not a world-class tennis player, we don't wanna see you.
Right.
I think if that message is sent, I would very much oppose this, and oppose candidly expanding your operation here.
Right.
So I'd like to make sure that we don't head in that
But
direction.
see, that doesn't mix with the fact that the courts are not used 100% all the
It
time.
mixes very much with that fact.
Why?
Because if you're discouraged from coming, you
Then
don't
how
come.
are you discouraged from coming?
I can go into it, I'm not sure this is the forum to go into it, but if you call and you ask, you say, I'm interested, I wanna learn how to play, and the response is, you gotta try out, then you don't show up.
If you wanna take lessons, but not if you just wanna go and
No,
play.
if you wanna show up and play, but I
You
wanna
can
get
do-
into that,
you can
I'm
show-
not
but if
raising
you wanna
this
take lessons.
I'm raising it, but I should, I can go into
I
details
see.
if needed, I don't think it's
Yeah.
appropriate forum for it.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
misunderstood.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have, I mean, I don't think that's the case. I mean, we try to get everybody out there. I mean, we definitely want the more people out there playing, the better. I think that, yeah, I don't know of any that's a happened to.
The case was brought to point, and maybe perhaps you forget, it was a few months ago, and I spoke to you about it. What they do when a person comes to them and says, I've got no experience, they need to see you. They need you to come out and get an appraisal, so to speak. They need to see you, and then they'll know where to place you. Do you get in the beginner class? Do you get in the intermediate class? The other class? And that communication may have been misconstrued in this point when they said, hey, we need you to try out. We need you to try out with
hours in that instance, which is a very, in any event, this is.
Right, we need you to try out so we can see where you're at, so, you know, and that may have been.
But I think the mayor has a point. I think that, you know, I know we've worked well together
Right.
and you've worked well with us, but I think it's a concern. So it's something that we want to make you aware of and hopefully help us with that level of sensitivity to
Right.
maybe create more flexibility to attract younger players that aren't good or
Right.
never have practiced or don't even know which end of the racket.
Right. Yeah, no, we hold those classes on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So, I mean, we do have those classes for the beginners for sure. I mean, that's how we get people in the sport. If we didn't have beginners, then there'd be no advanced players.
Yeah, I
you know?
think that, with the mayor's comments, it's a very important comment.
Right.
Because we don't want it to be an exclusive private club only training the pros.
Right.
We want to be able to, I mean, I want my daughter to PAX,
Mhm.
go out there and have an opportunity, but also have that ability to have, you know, a flexible time frame with your staff and your people to be flexible enough to say, hey, wait a minute, we're only getting little girls between the hours of X and X. Maybe we should make that available.
Right.
The only other thing, comment, with regard to water use, we got a lot of water now, that's great. In the event that we hit another drought, how would that play out? Is this something we could shut off? What would the damage be to the court? It's, you know, not a significant amount of water.
Pretty sure if we had to shut off the water, that we wouldn't be able to use the court. We could shut off the water, but the court would dry out.
And contractually, what would the expectation would be, we are gonna continue to water this court through a drought period or not?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think that, you know, as the liaison to the Park and Rec, I've worked a lot with Michael. And I think Michael has been very easy to work with from the Park and Rec perspective. He's brought the tennis program to a level that it hadn't been, and I don't mean professional, I mean organized. And that's, I've heard from lots of residents that are very happy with the program. And maybe I've heard from them because of my association at Park and Rec. charged a fee that they're not gonna take advantage of, and they're kind of being used in that way, I would be sensitive to that. And I guess my preference would be, I think it's planned that there'll be one key that's given to Atherton key holders, and that key will open both the courts and the clay court. But I think non-Atherton residents are being given a key that would not open the clay court.
That's correct.
So it would be possible to have a bifurcated Atherton fee structure, and to manage that, I don't know what the implication of would be. We have 78 key holders from Atherton, and I have no idea what number would be interested in the clay court and what wouldn't, and what the impact would be. I don't think that issue should stop us from moving forward on this, because I think it's a real benefit to the town and to the tennis program in the town to have a clay court. And it's a particularly good benefit for older players. And that's something that I want to encourage. I agree with the comment that we have to make sure that beginner players are welcomed and that they feel like there's a role for them. So this is the first time I've ever heard that there was an issue there. And I've seen there's plenty of beginner players. When I've gone down there and seen the players, there's a whole range of quality of players, which is exactly what you want in a public program.
One other just comment on the pricing. We may want to keep an eye on the pricing, because if a non-resident is opting to buy and keep $200 to give them access, or charge you $30 an hour, that break-even point's going to get hit pretty quickly, right? That's six and a half hours essentially. So we may want to revisit this if it really matter, if there's some way to maximize it.
No, but you got to understand, the $30 an hour is going to to the tennis program. It's not coming to the town.
Understood that, but my understanding is a non-resident would either pay $30 per hour or $200 one time, right?
No, just for the clay court. You have to have a key before you can pay the $30.
They're paying $200.
Oh, I'm saying $200.
You still gotta have the key.
So if I'm a non-resident, I want to use it for an hour, I'm still charged $30?
You have to pay your $200 first to get a key,
And then 30?
and then 30 per hour for the.
It's an extra, okay, I didn't realize that, okay, so it's an extra 30, okay.
That's
That 30 doesn't go to the town, it goes to.
No, I understand that, but
No problem. This agenda doesn't have anything, the agenda does not mention the word fee.
Oh, it's a conversation in the staff report.
Conversation in the staff report, but it's not mentioned in the agenda, and that is favorable under the Rocker case. It has to say an action.
But they're not taking an action.
They could recommend it, that's why I say, it's easy to discuss, but you don't have to make a decision tonight on what you wanna do with the cost. I think Rick's point was well taken. It's good to talk about, it's good to get them out there and get some discussion, but you might want to, get some concrete numbers back in,
Bring the feedback later.
That's the whole idea. We just need feedback.
The problem is,
We just got loose.
the problem is there was so much part of the
We got
staff
it.
report and so much mentioned up here, and now we're discussing specifics.
Okay, we need, and we want them to discuss specifics because we need direction. So the motion that the council would do this evening is accept the donation and authorize a 3-year extension on Player Capital's contract.
Yep.
Provide direction to staff with respect to the key pricing.
We'll come back, right?
Yeah, we're gonna have that has to.
And the amendment to the agreement.
Bring back the agreement.
Right, so two things we can bring back, which is the key and the final agreement. Simple. Right?
So we are authorizing, what is authorizing the extension, do we approving it or?
Well, the original Player Capital agreement has an authorized 3-year extension.
So
built
we're
in.
gonna do a recent.
So I think we're directing council to draft a new agreement for an additional 3 years, and that could come back to us.
But you already have the Player Capital agreement, it already incorporates an automatic 3-year extension.
So we just,
Or approval.
we just do it,
So we
we
don't
approve it.
So we don't need to do anything, we'll just wait for the key discussion.
The only thing you're gonna talk about again is the keys.
The keys.
Okay.
Keys. We're coming back with keys.
But the feedback feedback we've got so far is to develop a strategy plan for maybe bifurcation. I've heard two possibles for that, and then maybe another scenario in there as well.
Yeah, in the first year, you see who's not taking it, and then if it's only 2 or 3 that aren't taking it, then fine, then you charge everybody, but let's see.
That's after we implement the system.
I personally feel that there's not, this is me personally, that that's not a large amount for the keys. I mean, but if somebody felt like they were just never going to use it, they could appeal it, and they could have the ability to get their $50 fee or $75 fee, whatever we would decide. And I think that would be a cleaner process, because I just don't think most people are really going to object to a $100 fee.
So we'll come back with 2 options for you to approve one or the other in terms of a key process. Does that work? Okay.
So you need a.
That work?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just on the key price.
That's
gonna open new year for us.
I'll make a motion to accept
What's up?
the donation
And authorize.
and authorize, the 3-year extension.
I second that.
We need public input.
Do we have public
Do we have
input
any
yet?
public input?
Oh, Mr. Condon.
I didn't realize that this was on the agenda, but since I play a lot of tennis, I figured I owe you a comment anyway. You know, what's happening across the country is a new sport called paddleball. And Palo Alto just, I didn't read the article, but it was in this week's weekly. Pickleball, what did I say, paddleball? No, pickleball. And we just redid our courts at our tennis court at our country club and put in 2 pickleball court lines. And we've got the nets and the paddles that people want to play. And it's a 1/4 the size of a tennis court. So people don't have to move as fast, they don't have to move at all if they can.
We have good reach.
The weed stand? If they've got long arms. If they got long arms. But I'm just saying that it's catching. I was in southern Utah, and the county there at St. George put in 16 courts for the public. 16 courts. And I know my friend who I'm going to spend some time with next month in Georgia, I mean, they're playing paddleball now, or pickleball instead of tennis. So it's at the country clubs.
What about a clay court?
I don't understand, why are we doing that?
Because someone is donating all the money to install one.
Well, that's good, it's a good opener.
Mr. Conlon, for only $100 a year, can have a key and have access to.
Oh, now, when you say, what court is it now? It's what?
Atherton Court?
No, but what's the?
Clay facility.
A clay court. Now, you're saying you gotta water it?
Yeah, or it dries out.
Because I played the clay court championship back in Virginia, and
No, it's underground
That was a few
water,
years
it
ago.
automatically waters.
They now refer to
You
the
can't
water.
see the water because it's underground.
but what's the,
If you want to
who wants to
donate
play
a
on it?
pickle court, we'll be happy to accept your donation too, Greg.
Hey, I don't wanna go there. I'll stick with pickleball.
Thanks.
But I would propose that you get him to come back and look at what Palo Alto's doing and read some of this national stuff.
You know, Palo Alto is their own little.
Well, no, but it's not Palo, it's the whole nation. I mean, pickleball
I
is
think
going
we should look
from east
into
to west,
pickleball.
and we're finally, it's kind of like the Republican Party. The Republican Party hasn't got here
I
yet.
never heard of it.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this matter? Yes.
Hello, my name is Victor Garcia, and I'm a student from Menlo College. And as you guys mentioned before, it's available for all Atherton residents. I was wondering if it's also available for the college students, because I know for a fact the tennis team would actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
So it is?
Absolutely.
But you have to
You
buy a
guys
key.
are Atherton residents,
Yeah, I was just confused about it.
Yeah, no, you are, you have every right we have.
Right? Yeah, I'll make sure.
Buy a key.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing no other comment from the public? Bring it back.
I second the motion.
We have a motion, second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, Greg, I'm sorry, Greg.
Well, I just wanted to ask in the motion, does this set the fee at the $40,000?
No.
Yes,
Fee of
yes,
40,000.
yes, it does.
Yes.
Layer capital contract.
Oh, that's.
Because that's part of
It
the.
doesn't change anything.
Right.
But we could agree to change the fee in connection with the extension.
That's what I suggested.
If we wanted to, I would like to keep the piece on what the fee is in the contract extension open
extension of the agreement. It doesn't say changing of the fee, which the public would have a right to come and comment on if that was going to be the fact. Council's pleasure.
So we're gonna hold that until we make the decision related to key costs.
I would suggest that, because it would be one source of payment for the maintenance.
Does
Or
the
at least
motion
part of
agree
it.
You
to the
wanna
amendment?
take the, part of the,
Or do you agree to the amendment?
well,
With
so,
a comment, perhaps. The donation did have a string.
yeah.
And I was just gonna suggest that there's a problem with that. Either continue the whole item if you're gonna do that, because if for some reason you wanna change the fee to some number and they don't agree to the fee change, that could impact whether or not the gift is still on the table.
A 3-year contract, you're talking $6,000.
How does that affect timing as well?
Is there a timing issue?
They would like to build it prior to next tennis season. It's about a 6-week process, 6 to 8 week process.
We got time. We got time.
Continue to January, give us some time to work some things out.
Before the rainy season ends. Mike, speak up.
Yeah, they would like to start before the new year.
Yeah, before December, before January.
Right.
So can we see it in December?
If we move forward on this, just the question is, it's not a lot of money. If we're to move forward in this project, is there a way we can, if we choose to focus on this $2,000 a year, there would be other ways to address that as we move forward, right?
Your player capital tennis could state right here, he's open to discussion of an amendment to
What?
the contract.
It's about $500 a year difference.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
2,500
the plan.
instead of, you're paying $2,000 a year per court. Right now, it's gonna go up to $2,500 a year per court, so we're talking $500.
I mean, it's
I
really.
mean,
And we're gonna be reevaluating the fees. I feel like we could mix that up.
I really.
Yeah, so we might as well move forward tonight, and if we're worried about that delta, we can figure out ways to address it.
Move forward.
Absolutely. So.
I agree.
So back to,
$500.
we get the motion in the second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice second.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
The original motion.
The original motion.
Thank you, council.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks,
Thank
Steve. If we don't, well, we'll see you again. Still unfortunate for them.
Moving on to item number 18.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Item number 18 is a discussion of next steps for park irrigation systems and an updated direction on the park statue and fountain restoration. Steve Tyler's got this one as well. Steve Tyler?
Yeah.
But basically, on irrigation staff's recommendation for that one is just that, given the water capture facility conversation, that we wait until we know what that's gonna look like before we do anything with the park irrigation, continue with current practice. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Hey, we have two pieces of damaged, possibly historical significance facilities in the park. One of them is the fountain that sits at the entrance to the park. It was damaged at the end of 2015 by vandals who pushed it over. The thing's made of steel, metal, some sort of metal. It broke some pieces when it went over, but it was then that we realized that really isn't a very safe setup if somebody can walk up to that thing and push it over. Especially, I've seen mothers letting their kids climb on it. You know, you never know what's going to happen out there. So we decided when it came down that we would look for a way to possibly put it back together in such a way that it couldn't fall over. And the other is the Diana statue. And the Diana statue was taken down as part of the beginning of the event garden. It was wrapped in bubble wrap, placed securely in our corporation yard. The event garden was finished. We moved it out to place it back in place on our famous pedestal out there. And the guys still in bubble wrap brought it out, and the weight of the statue as they were carrying it, it just crumbled into a number of pieces. It's still wrapped, and we had it examined by a person that from Washington, D.C. that does that type of restoration. We also had them look at our fountain. Just a little caveat on that, we had a resident in town who had that same kind of work being done at her home. So she was able to have him come out at no charge because they're from Washington DC. He looked over the items and gave us pricing of about $50,000 each to restore. So staff needs some direction as far as how council feels about paying those prices to restore it. Do we want to see if we can, if there's the interest from council to have that done? Would it be better to search for some sort of close replicas to those that are made out of something like cement or, I don't want to say fiberglass, but some similar type material? How do we want to go about replacing those items? So it's a lot of money.
Any clarifying questions? Questions from council? None. Is there questions or comments from the public on this matter?
Denise Kupperman, 74 Atherton Avenue. My one comment actually has to deal with the first part of this matter, which is being continued because of the water storage retention, which is to continue the continuing practice of irrigation. The park lost a significant number of trees over the course of the drought. Most of the trees in the park don't get any kind of irrigation, and they're watered either by hand or some ad hoc method. And all trees, whether they're drought tolerant or not, require irrigation. We lost 14 elms. So I would encourage us to at least look on how we're going to manage to water the trees in the park over the course of this project. And if it, I know it can't be addressed tonight, but perhaps at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Any other comment from members of the public on this issue? Okay, bring it back to council. Comments?
I personally, not dealing with the drought issue or the drought comments related to the trees, I think that's something we're dealing with at a later date. But secondarily, the fountain and the statue. Personally, I feel that, probably it's time, it's been damaged enough to set it aside. And if we're going to consider something in the future, maybe saving this as, part of the historical significance to the park or such. And if we're going to replace it by replacing it with far cheaper than $100,000, I'm sure we can get a fountain. And maybe we can actually work with the Parks Group for Community Arts and create bigger, instead of the Diana, maybe a Susanna or Santa will work. So to me, I just think that's something we can probably push off into the work. Because the likelihood is we could potentially damage it with potentially something else in the park.
So, given that, we're trying to be conservative with what we spend our money on and things like that, I think that $100,000 on these two items is not in that vein. I understand that the Historical Society is very interested in these, and if there could be some sort of donation to get them restored or a program to get them restored through a donation program, I'd be in favor of allowing that to happen. I think that there was a suggestion maybe they could have a donation program and move the fountain over here and make it more stable. But I just can't see at this point in time, and given where we are, to spend $100,000 on something that actually they both have been repaired in the past, so their historical significance has been altered in some manner. And the Diana statue, from the pictures we've seen and things, it's never going to look the same anyway. And so, I feel sorry that that's happened, but I think that we need to find a replacement to put on that pedestal and look elsewhere for doing something with regards to the fountain.
So it seems that I recall that these on the park, at the park.
That's,
They-
thank you.
Well, it seems to me that I heard at one point that some of the flood estate artifacts, which are similar,
Same manufacturer.
were like bought out of a catalog, like a garden
This was.
catalog. And so, in a sense, they are not fine pieces of art. They do have historic significance for our town, and they've certainly graced our park for many years. But at a cost of $50,000 each to repair them, I have to agree with Councilmember Widmer's assessment that at this time we just don't have that much money to fund it. And if there was a fundraising effort, someone wanted to restore them for the historical significance that they have for our town, but I just don't see that. I mean, I haven't seen it in person, but it looks like it's pretty damaged.
It's pretty damaged. And the problem is, it's made out of a type of metal that's not easily, it's
kinda
not like
a
steel where you can weld it.
galvanized lead or something. What is it?
It's
Zinc.
Hot metal. Yeah, okay. So which is very soft and
Very soft.
brittle. Soft and brittle. Okay. It's not like, you know.
So I guess I look at these two artifacts differently. I don't disagree with Con about them being not worth the price that the conservators have suggested. The fountain has been through all kinds of change and is not a very interesting fountain. Diana, when she was standing in the park, she looked good, and she is completely broken up. There's no question, but she was completely broken up once before, and she was completely restored, and we have all the records for that. I have no doubt that if we wanted to, she could be restored and look as good or better than she looked. And that is because if you had a conservator restore her, she would look like she was supposed to look. But what we did last time was we had somebody come in and pour a concrete base into her that didn't previously exist there and put the metal back together. It was broken up like this, and they welded it, and then they painted it with white house paint. And it was not done the way that you would do a piece of art. This is not a piece of art. It was a garden statue that was bought out of a catalog in the 1880s or early 1890s. It's the same manufacturer as some other artifacts, J.W. Fisk, that are in Lindenwood. I think that if there were I think the right way to restore her, if it's gonna happen, is through a fundraising campaign that the Historical Association would lead. And Bill's right, there's interest in both of these artifacts because they've been in the park for a long time. But $50,000 is a lot to restore something that's probably, I don't know what, this statue is available elsewhere as a antique garden statue that had been bought out of the catalog in the 1880s. And I don't know what they go for, but they don't go for $50,000.
Okay, I agree with what's been said. $100,000 is an awful lot of money to spend in this today's environment. I do think it would be important to set aside the Diana statue as shaped as it is, assuming that room, because the time may come when we do it. That'd be my thought. And then I guess I have a question for council, which is, it sounds like we're not at today's meeting. We should not be speaking about the completely reasonable and intelligent comment made by Denise Kupferman about watering the trees.
That was part. That's the irrigation.
Are we able to address that?
Can I address that, because that struck me as a completely, as a,
Yeah.
something we absolutely should be doing. And there's no excuse not to be doing that, if we're not, I don't know if we're not doing it or not. The comment was that we should make sure that while we're at this project's going on, make sure that we are not gonna lose any more trees, because we don't have a system for watering them on a regular basis.
We do have a system, it's just not automated, or it's hand
Systematic.
watering, right?
It's not systematic.
Well, we're gonna review the,
What's the same water they've gotten since they were planted?
Well, there's nothing wrong with the water,
It's just.
It's what they get.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be revisiting the irrigation item once we know more about the water capture
Got it.
facility, that's in February.
I think the message I heard, and if it's not the case, it's not the case, the message I heard is that we've lost a lot of trees during the drought, it's been a stressful time, and let's, as we go through a period now, let's not wait until we have a new irrigation system to make sure the trees are getting the water they need, let's just make sure we got something in place where they're getting the water now.
Well, frankly, I lost a couple of trees at my house too.
Right,
We were
great.
turning it around, and we really try to do our best not to, but, we're going to cut back. Okay. All right.
Do you need anything other than that?
Just some clarity, are we suggesting then that we just try and retain both of these in bubble wrap storm as long as we can? We figure out what we want to do with them, including the fountain? Or just the
I don't think it hurts if somebody says they wanna, if somebody volunteers and says, hey, we really want to replace it, but we'll do it.
as long as you have space.
Is it helpful to prioritize? Because I always prioritize Diana over the time, if we
Yeah,
choose in space or something like that.
Okay, well, we can bubble wrap them now, and if we have a space issue, then we
The only piece that will be left out is the base of the fountain, is the bowl, the bottom bowl is still intact in the pedestal that was poured for it back in 2009. The rest of it is in storage in the corporation yard, and so will be Diana at that city.
You got a little shed in the back of your yard.
Yeah.
Take it as a retirement momentum to hold on. Thank you. Shall we move on to item 19?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you have before you item number 19, which is the Civic Center project. And I will turn this over to Marty, who's got a couple of action items within it, and some updates and information.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, there's actually 7 items in your report for your recommendation. And I'm not sure how you want to take these, Mayor, because...
Works best if we just go 1, 2, 3.
Okay, because we have members in the public here that want to speak to a few things on there too, so...
Okay.
I want to speak on the trees.
There's,
Why don't we start with the trees then, because apparently that's what we want to talk about.
well, there's people who are trees and also 2 property owners that want to talk about fences, so...
Let's do those first, and then we'll do the rest.
All right, so, you want to go to the fences first, or? Okay. So we were, staff's asking for direction on where to put the proposed new 8-foot redwood fence on the property lines with 73 Ashfield Road. The property owner, Dr. Olson's here today, and she might want to speak to that in a minute. And then, and then also for 76 Fair Oaks Lane is Mr. Chen. He's also here on behalf to speak about the fence line along his property line. And if you look at attachments 6 and 7 in your staff reports, you'll see the updated survey that was recently done about back in October per council's direction through 73 Ashfield, and then in the back where it connects to the Chen property in the back there. And then there's some pictures also associated that we have in your staff report to show where that property line goes directly along the 73 Ashfield property line. So again, what we're asking for tonight is council direction of, where do you want to put the new proposed fence line, and also, what kind of fence. But right now, what's in the plans is to put an 8-foot redwood fence up on the property line, but that's of course to council's discretion how you want to do that. So with that, I don't know if Dr. Olson would like to address the council.
So I took some pictures and I kind of drew a thing to talk about the mine. Here, Mike, if you want to help myself.
Oh, thank you.
Totally, this is kind of my drawing of the area. So I want to thank you again for letting me speak, and also thank you for doing the surveying so rapidly. It was really nice to actually see this line that has been talked about for so long, and I really have never known where it is. And so, in looking at the house, I tried to sketch it out. because there's like the house is on one line, and then parallel to it is this hedge and the fence that's existing. But the property line, as you'll see on kind of my sketch and on the survey, it kind of goes at this angle through the property. So it starts kind of on one side of my hedge in the front of the house, cuts through the middle of the hedge, goes on one side of 4 redwood trees, and then kind of cuts through the edge of 2 of the redwood trees, and then kind of skews off to the end of the property. So what we would like to do is not have a fence that kind of curves all around the trees and the hedge to follow the property line exactly. But I think if we could just make a straight line, it would be very close to the property line, but would give something that's a lot more aesthetic. So I kind of did my sketch, and then right the next page, the first picture shows from in my backyard looking at the hedge and where the property line is, which is that marker. It kind of is right in the middle of this hedge. It looks a little off center because we trim our side flat to the property, and then the other side's gotten real bushy. But when you look at the roots, it kind of is right in the middle. So the next page shows it more from a distance along the house. So if the fence goes along the property line, you get an idea of where it would be. On the edge of the property that's closest to Ashfield, there's a good distance from the redwood trees to the property line. It doesn't look like it would encroach on it at all. It's quite close to the house. So I did take some pictures later on where you can see the difference in the view with this. But so you get an idea of where the property line is in relation to the house. And then the next picture, picture 3, is turned the other way and looking from that same vantage point to the back of the property. So you can see the other trees and how the property line goes kind of down part of the trees. So, and then goes all the way to the back of the property. So it's this really kind of an odd space. I'm not sure why they built the house where they did. It just seems kind of a strange thing. So the next picture is kind of what my existing view is from the kitchen. So when I look out right now, you just see these redwood trees, and then in the further distance, the wall. And then you get a picture where you can see the property line. So picture 5 shows that same view, but I got real close to the window so you can see the property line. So you can really see how much this fence is going to impact the view from our house. And then the next 2 pictures are the same thing from the dining room, which is on that same wall. You can see what it looks like now when you look out and you see a tree. And then the next picture you can see where the property line is right there. So we're going to basically look out and see a fence. So we would really like an aesthetic fence. And again, if we could do it where it would just be a straight line, that would be ideal. It's not that much different. When you stand right at the fence property line on the back of the property, if you move over enough to not go right through those trees, it's a pretty straight shot. And that to me makes the most sense, which is why I drew the line like that. In the front yard, I drew the hedge, which is picture 8. So you can see, I couldn't do them all in color, so it's harder to see, but the marker starts off kind of on one side of the hedge, and then it disappears into the hedge, and by the end you can't see it at all because it's kind of in the middle of the hedge. It's easier to see on a color photo, but I didn't have time to make all color. So with that, I don't think there's a way of making it follow the, well, you can't exactly follow the property line because it does go through the edges of 2 of the redwood trees. And I would love to preserve the hedge because, again, as you can see from the pictures, it's a really mature hedge. We've been growing it for 15 years, and it just really provides a lot of privacy and a nice green wall there. So we're going to lose a lot of the green from the trees, but if we have a nice redwood fence and the trees will be above it, not much will grow under the redwood trees, so there's not like I can put, ivy or something that's going to do very well. But the front, if we can maintain that hedge and just have the fence just on the other side of it, it pretty much lines up with the edge of the hedge going straight through the property, not encroaching on the trees on either side. And if it was a nice aesthetic fence, I think that would be, for us at least, I think it would be ideal.
Thank you. Can I also ask, when you say nice aesthetic fence, the plan is a 7-foot redwood?
8-foot.
8-foot redwood, is that a nice aesthetic fence?
I think a redwood fence is aesthetic, yeah, not like a wall.
Not like a brick wall.
Not like a brick wall. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Matt, if you want to come up. Mr. Chen is property owner of 76 Fair Oaks, which when we did the survey for the 73 Ashfield property, we found out that the fence on that property line is about 1.2 feet off. There's actually a concrete slatted fence there in the back along the Chen property. And based on the survey, that fence is about 1.2 feet on town property also. So again, the project is to take these fences out and put in new 8-foot redwood fences. And then the question is, where do you want to put those?
So fortunately, we don't have as much greenery on there. We can work with you guys. The only issue is we have like I measured, there's like a pittosporum that's about 2.5 feet. So whatever you put in, let's just try to respect the roots and try to keep it there, because it does actually kind of hide the telecommunications tower that's like right next to the yard. So, but I mean, I think I measured it. It's like 2.5 feet. I think if we can figure something out, it should be okay. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Mayor, we're asking for direction on that.
No.
Our plans that we've designed, that we've drawn up, that was drawn up according to a plat map, right? That didn't take into consideration these fence encroachments at all. And so we've already designed our plans according to where our boundary really should be.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
No, I think it's designed based on where the fence currently exists.
No.
It's designed based on an unknown plat.
Correct.
On a plat map.
Right.
That had been, an assessor's plat map. And then when we had the surveyor come out, they figured out that, well, this plat map doesn't match where the physical fence lines are, and so then we had to, and so that creates an issue with what you're proposing to do, because the property line has already been determined in these plans along the real property line. So to fudge the property line now would encroach into the plan?
Yeah, but there's buffer area there, so there's really nothing structurally going to be built there. Actually, going to be a greenery, buffering, and then some parking for police. So I'm not sure exactly how much Dr. Olson, because it wasn't clear how much you're thinking about moving the fence over from the current property line. Yeah, I do, but
But it's unlikely it would impact hardscape, but it would impact softscape in moving the fence over.
Right.
Hedges and other things we're putting in there, but from a legal perspective, you're still creating a gift.
It would be about, what were you gonna do with the tree part where it goes through the redwood tree?
Probably step over the trees where the old foundations may have been.
Right.
Oh, what that means, like, cut a hole.
The current plan,
we'd bow it out a little bit.
roadway, it doesn't remove these 4 redwood trees. This is just planting material. It comes, the parking is over in front of these redwood trees.
Correct.
These are the redwood trees. So the redwood trees are in a planting zone. And this shows a straight line with new, along the property line, right? This shows that it would be a angled line.
Right, that's what
It's not very clear. It's straight for a distance, like for the part towards Asheville Road, and then you can't go straight the whole way, because then you are about maybe less than a foot, I think, but into the redwood trees, 2 of the redwood trees, if you tried to go straight.
And
It's angled because that's wider here.
So what is the,
It's actually straight.
what is the base of the triangle that we're essentially building? What is the length of the base?
How much square footage is the difference between our property line and the?
Well, I just asked Dr. Olson. She said it's about 1.5 feet.
Yeah, it's just like the kind of, almost the width of the, half the hedge.
Right.
Right.
And I don't know what that calcs out to.
And then you were also asking for then the fence to be on the other side of the hedge. Is that not?
Well, that's, the property line kind of goes through the middle of the hedge. So it would just be, if it was right on that side of the hedge, then it would be a straight line.
And then are the original fence line,
It's quite a bit further towards
about
the,
the original fence lines where, you know, we saw some pictures where there was actually the cement posts were still in the ground. Are they there on the original property line at this location too, or was it just further back?
No, they're, you mean by the hedge? I'm not sure what's by the hedge.
I don't think there were any cement posts, there's just the original wall is still there, the concrete wall that's between us and the police station.
I only
saw some
noticed.
pictures that when they did the surveying, there was these items down in the ground where the fence was cut.
Right, but that was only from where the gate area to the back. There's nothing in the hedge area that we're aware of.
I have a question. So, from the public interest perspective, there's a lot of sensitivity as to what's public property and not making a gift of public property, which I don't think that we can do. If you go out there and look at it, the hedge that is there is a wall. It's a very old hedge, and it's a very nice hedge. My thinking is, well, we don't have to give up. There's not a requirement that we put in a fence
At that location, where the
Right.
hedge is.
or at any location
Sure.
along our property line. There's not a requirement.
Right.
But let's just, for right now, just focus on the hedge. We could,
Just
you know,
fence hedges.
take
Yeah.
back our property, which includes the hedge. I mean, actually, it doesn't go through the middle of the hedge. It goes through the middle of the hedge at your wall,
at the fence line.
at the fence line, and then it the rest of the hedge is pretty much on the town's property. I mean, it cuts through it.
Right, yeah.
But if we left the hedge there,
Yeah.
understanding that, you know, the property line goes through it, it's mostly on our property, it obviously we're agreeing to, in our landscape plan, to include in our landscape plan an existing mature hedge. And we wanna maintain that hedge, just as the homeowner wants to maintain that hedge, but I think that would give her the benefit of the hedge, so you don't wall off the hedge and you just end up with a redwood fence.
Right.
That might be an elegant way to deal with that piece of it.
Good idea.
I
And
think
then,
that'd be great.
you know, with the
Saving
fence
hedge.
line going along our property line, she could extend her hedge in front of that, new fence. I mean, I've got English laurel hedges all around, and so that would give you, you know, some softness onto the fence.
Councilmember Goldie, if you'd like to do that, an easy way of doing that would be to grant her an encroachment permit into our property and let her maintain them and contain them, just as she has done in the past, because otherwise you're gonna get cross watering and things like that. But that piece would be very easy to handle, because we do that all over town where people put things in our right of way. But that could be easily done on that property.
I think that for that piece, that's a good solution.
I do too. I think that would be perfect, because we definitely don't mind maintaining the hedge, and it just looks a lot nicer than a wall. And in the backyard, whether it's, you know, a foot over or not, if you can make it work, then that's much less important than, you know, I think that would be great.
You haven't seen our hedge trimmers.
Ah.
One of them's retiring.
Steve's not
If we
listening.
enter into an encroachment permit that she
wants to do it, I don't
and she
mind.
doesn't have to worry about our hedge.
Rick, you were talking about that part, you said as though you have thoughts on other parts, is that correct?
Well,
I'm sure you can.
I mean, on this map, you know, what's a straight line and how's it look? If you look on the town's flat map, putting the fence here would look like it'd be at an angle, right?
For her house,
putting the fence where she's proposed would, it would line up with her house's, it would be parallel with her house. And her comment was right, which is, why did they put the house at this angle? Because it's really not parallel with the property line. But
probably
you
because
can't deal with that.
right, and landscaping, you know, in front of your fence.
Well, that's a good idea.
Would be easy to do, you know, going off, you know, extending your hedge and just landscaping there. And I can, we've got a landscape architect,
If I could, just to try to keep us focused on this right now, are we, Marty and George, are you getting guidance on this particular parcel?
With respect to the front hedge, maintain the hedge.
Right. What encroachment permit, right.
The rest of it, get as close to the trees as we can without having an issue, leave some on their side.
We can actually,
Are we clear that we will?
Pass the hedge front fence.
yeah.
we can bow, so I'm clear, bow around the existing redwoods, right?
Right.
That's
And
what we're
then,
talking
and I
about.
talked to the town arborist, and then Steve's also an arborist too, we can extend the posts so we don't damage the roots of those redwoods.
Right.
So
Well,
that's,
and we should cut out the fence where it comes up against the redwood trees, and we have that all over the town.
we can do that too, Councilman
Well,
Morale.
I think the goal is to be sensitive to the redwoods, so
Right.
putting the fence in with sensitivity to the root systems.
So we could stop and start the fence, on either side of those redwoods, is that what I'm hearing? Okay, okay, we can do
If
that.
that's,
And related
Is
to
that-
Mr. Chin's, we're just gonna go ahead. So,
Case has been formed.
It's kind of bowling it around.
get what we're gonna do with Mr.
With the
Mr.
tennis
Chin.
forum?
I'll tell you for sure.
Mr. Chin's, just be sensitive to his.
Correct,
And say,
right,
okay.
yeah, no,
Does that give us sufficient
Yes.
guidance on those two items?
yes.
Can we move to the next item, please?
Next item, Mayor, let's move on to actually the tree issues, which is in part of number 6 and also 7 on your items, and that's regarding the Planning Commission meeting that was held on October 25th. And Lisa Costa Sanders here, of course, the town planner, and she can relate to what happened at that meeting. It's also, of course, in your staff report. And I know there's a number of people here from the public that would like to talk about the trees that are proposed to be removed as part of the project. So, I don't know, Lisa, do you want to summarize the Planning Commission meeting?
Well, the Planning Commission went through and really evaluated each tree individually. We walked through each tree, talked to the landscape architect as well as the town's 2 arborists about the conditions of the trees. And the Planning Commission was comfortable with the trees that were requested for removal due to their condition. So that was kind of the first one they checked off, is those trees. And then they were also comfortable with the removal of the trees that were really in direct conflict with the buildings. So they understood that as well. And then they kind of got down to some trees that were in, you know, maybe in some walkways or adjacent to roadways. And they requested that during the course of construction and when we get more detailed construction plans, that staff take a closer look and the project architects take a closer look at 5 of those trees to see if there's any way they can be preserved. But they did grant approval of the heritage tree removal permit.
In the staff report, we're looking at, on page 6 of 8, 5 trees that are in poor condition, and they're enumerated. And then it says 6 trees will be evaluated during construction for possible retention.
Correct.
And those are those 6. And then the 7, we're talking about removing 7 because of parking, construction issues.
Correct.
Is that right? I thought it was different.
We found another one that we could possibly address.
Yeah,
Right.
I thought there were, okay, we found,
Another tree to possibly.
Right,
Preserve.
right, preserve. And that came out of the project management committee that
yes.
you.
Is that the one, is
That's
it,
102.
is it 102?
Right, actually 102, that's correct.
And would that be
Was already
moved? Or would it be preserved where it is?
We're gonna look at both, whether we can keep it in place or if possible, transplant it. Right.
102 is,
Redwood.
it's so costly to transplant.
That's
And
actually
there's
was,
no way to
yeah.
redesign.
That was 55 is the one I think you.
55 is in the entrance library, this 102 is from the side entrance to the front.
So, if I could ask Lisa a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Bill's got a question.
So Lisa, normally at the planning commission, obviously there's an existing house and there's a tree that's in the build zone and the tree isn't doing well or the people are afraid of what it may do to the tree, falling down or whatever. The planning commission gives permission to move forward. Oftentimes the planning commission looks at trees, and when you're just doing the design and you say, I'd like to take this tree down because I'm going to put my build zone here, so the tree's gotta go, oftentimes those are not approved. And one of the letters that I got from one of the residents, I think it's here today, did say, I thought that you guys said that when you build this new civic center, you're going to build it keeping in mind and following all the rules that we ask the residents to do. And it just doesn't seem, if they're sickly or they're very young, I can see taking them down, but on something like, a heritage oak, I just think that maybe because of the euphoria for the civic center, that there was approval given when we wouldn't have given it to a normal builder.
Well, one thing that a private property owner doesn't have to deal with is ADA parking spaces, driveways, turnarounds for fire trucks, things like that we've got to deal with that are outside the building footprint and design of the structures.
Well, I could say, and I understand that, and I do appreciate, I guess, the comments that you made to say we'd have to take out two parking places here, and if we take out the other one, we have to take out maybe 3 there. I also remember that I brought up the fact that we were reducing parking places and no one seemed to care at that time. And I use that word graciously. I apologize if I'm insulting anybody. But I did bring up the fact that we were reducing spaces. So for us to lose another 2 or 3 spaces to save a tree that's 100 years old, we can't buy another one or plant it in. So I would think that we would do our best to try and save a couple of these big trees. Especially, we wouldn't let a resident do it. So that's my comment. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Can I get just clarification? Are there, does that situation exist where there's a parking space?
We would lose up to probably 6 or so parking spaces to save 3 trees.
Actually,
on the site where we're going from 177 down to 88.
It's very hard to see on this little.
Yeah.
It's very hard to see.
Okay. I didn't go to the public for any clarifying questions or comments. Anybody, members of the public have comments?
Hi, my name is Betsy Colby, and thank you for your time. I hope you'll find a way to save more of the heritage oaks. The trees are not just a decorative backdrop. They're an entire ecosystem. Those big trees are probably 100, maybe 200 years old. They support a lot of life in the soil, in the insects, in the animals. And the mature trees are also a prime source of carbon sequestration. Once they get cut down, all that carbon's going to go into the air as they decompose. I reviewed the list of the 129 trees that was in the report, and I focused especially on the oak trees. That's the ones that are most interesting to me. There's some confusion about exactly what the numbers are because some of the trees have died, but when I count them, I came up with 35 heritage oak trees and 15 will be removed. And that's almost half of the heritage oak trees. I know some are being saved, but I'm hoping that we can save some more. My particular favorite is number 67, which is right over here in the parking lot next to the building trailer. It's been in that parking lot for years, and I think you should be able to design the driveway around it. So when the Planning Commission approved removal of all 18 trees, they put a condition on 4 of them. But I see that there really is no grounds to enforce that. It's something that they'll talk about, but as soon as the construction fences go up, we have no way to stop them from just taking the trees out. I considered appealing it, but found out that that would cost $750, so that's why I'm here tonight. So I hope you'll find ways to influence the design so we can save more trees. Thank you.
Thank you very
Can
much.
I ask a question? Betsy, you said number 67 is one of
Right
your
here.
favorites.
Right here, that valley oak right there.
Oh, you crossed over.
No, but it's
I
not.
know, but so it's number 67.
Correct.
Okay, all right. I didn't see it on this piece of paper.
Look for it.
I know, so.
Do we have any other, I'm sorry, you done the question?
Yeah, well, yeah, okay.
Any other members of the comment on this issue?
Denise Kupperman, 74 Atherton Avenue, longtime member of the Atherton Tree Committee. And I'm a little curious about the process with the removal of 18 heritage trees related to this project. It appeared didn't really appear as an item in this council meeting. Really only members of the tree committee were aware of the issue at hand. Does not specifically listed in item number 15 when you're talking about the tentative parcel map combination and the item here before us on 19. So in terms of transparency, I would encourage you, if you were to hear this item again, that this item be specifically stated, because this was an item that was specifically stated in the Planning Commission hearing. It doesn't look or appear to be particularly good. The Planning Commission did set aside maybe 4 trees. I find it very curious that somehow the findings of our town arborist, who's incredibly well respected, are somewhat, I think, at this point being ignored. Out of the 18 trees, she agreed that 4 would be up for removal due to their health or structure, limb structures. The remaining 14 would not be recommended to be removed given their health, etc. There are ways to mitigate construction, especially with roadways and parking lots. It's air spading, structural soil, and maybe some redesign. It might cost a little bit more, but there are ways to save these trees. Stanford redesigned Campus Drive, and there were 5 major trees. If it comes to a waterway or utilities, you can bore. My major concern is that if the town were to decide to remove these trees, there is nothing to prevent a developer or a future homeowner coming in and saying, why are these rules applying to me when it doesn't apply to you with a major project? So I care about really most of the trees here. It might be difficult to save all of them. I would encourage you to really re-examine the project. Thank you.
Other comments?
I'm Nancy Grove. I live at 102 Britain, and I've been a resident of Atherton for 55 years, on and off, though.
You win.
I also came to talk about the trees and request that the council take whatever action is available to you all to prevent the removal of at least 13 trees from the Civic Center site. And again, the numbers vary a little bit, but they're enough to be concerned. I want to start with a thank you to the council members for supporting your town so tirelessly. There are many quiet citizens like me out there who really appreciate your service, and I, for one, don't want to make your job any harder. And I know the town center project has kind of been going on for a long time, and further delays seem untenable, but I really think that this is an important matter. I like Denise, am concerned a bit about the process. Apparently, at least 13 of these large heritage oaks were not recommended for removal by the town arborist, and they're now on the chopping block, so to speak. I think removal is kind of a euphemism. It sounds like plucking a weed. These trees have a potential lifespan of up to 250 years, and some of these oaks may have antedated the first white settlers in the Bay Area, and that's the height of hubris to think about just removing them because we want to put a building there. My husband and I were once forced to remove a tree that was in our yard that was about to fall on our house, and anybody who's ever witnessed one of these gentle giants coming down, it's a sight that's quite painful. You find the squirrel nests and the bird nests in the canopy, and you realize how much animal life it supports. You look at just the hugeness of it, and you realize these trees sequester an average of 50 to 100 pounds of carbon every year, and if you multiply that by trees times years, it seems a little crazy. We're talking about building a LEED certified building, and then we're cutting down organisms that sequester carbon. We've talked about the hardscape, and that some of these would have fairly simple fixes. I also don't understand how we got to the point where the Planning Commission is recommending these things. It seems that there has been an effort by the town arborist to save at least some of them, and citizens who want to advocate on behalf of the trees in order to have an appeal have to pay $750. That seems wrong to me. Atherton is largely defined by its trees. A live tree is on our town seal right behind your heads. Preserving these trees is more central to our town's quality of life than any building that could be built. Please let us not destroy what is unique and special to our collective life here in Atherton. Thank you.
Good evening, Christy Waldron, 71 Heather Drive. We moved to Atherton 17 years ago. We were fortunate enough to be able to move here. We drove into Lindenwood, and my 16-month-old son, who had a vocabulary of about 12 words, said, "Ooh, Mommy, the tree tunnel." And we drove into Lindenwood. So that was why we moved here, was the oaks. As has been pointed out, it is the symbol of our town. It is not a cut-off stump. It is a tree. I spent 8 years on the Planning Commission working to balance the need to remove trees and preserve them in this town. And, I just want to encourage you all to do your best. We are the communal owners of this project. As the owners of the project, and you as our representatives, I implore you please to save as many of the trees as possible. We are a tree town. We have a tree committee. Please, don't make that for naught. Just try your best, please, as our representatives and our owners of this project, to remove as few trees as possible. Thank you.
I just want to say one thing about the trees, because it reminded me since we started talking about the trees. Several of my neighbors have asked questions about the trees, which trees are going to be removed. And I don't know, and I didn't know where this map was that shows the different trees. But you've heard everything, and everyone's going to say basically the same thing if we brought, because all the people I know in Ashfield and Maple were real concerned about the trees as well. Is there any other forum for them to say their input on the trees, or which trees they particularly feel should be saved? Is there another meeting, or?
So just to explain the process a little bit, the Planning Commission is the process through which heritage tree permits are processed. They make not a recommendation to the council, but a determination and decision. So that's then can be appealed to the council for continuing conversation. It's on your agenda tonight as information. And you can provide feedback. We can certainly make adjustments as we go along based on that council feedback. If you want to do a design change and have WRNS do that, they provided an estimate for just that 67 tree in the middle of the PD parking lot. That design change alone is about a month's worth of time and $25,000 to do that singular tree. So there is an impact on the project to do that. And there are 89 heritage trees on the site. And at this point, the removal number is 7.
No, that's not right.
89, 5 because of condition, and 7 because of the project.
One of the five had already been died, it fell over, or is that one that's the different, that's one that's on the
cited in instruction for possible retention, and 7 trees that will need to be removed. So that's understood, but isn't that up to 13?
That's 13, 5 because of condition and 7 because of.
No, that's 13.
This 5 are, they're sick or dying.
Understood.
It's
And then next is
12
6.
to be removed plus a potential additional 6, depending on whether they can be saved or not.
Right. The intent is to save those.
Right.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
Because when this came before
That's
the
different what you just said.
PMC, the Project Management Committee of the Civic Center, earlier, we all went, what? But, you know, we all did, and everybody got up and walked around and said, no, we've got to save more trees. I mean, and that's why we're looking at this again.
Okay. I'm sorry, any other members of the public? Yes. Okay.
Council, just me again. So, I echo everybody's comments about trying to keep the trees. On a more selfish note, since my property's right against it, we were going to point out, I've talked with Marty about this, so it's not anything. It's tree 78 and 76 are right there. 78 is a very grand note that's being taken out, so good health. Given where the building is, you know, if the building stays there, we understand it probably has to be removed. I think we already talked with Marty and some of the project about, I think tree 76 about taking a look at. But in light of the fact that, you know, 78 is being removed, I think I talked to the landscape and I was asking whether or not council could maybe get some direction to maybe the project manager about maybe having some kind of mitigation or putting trees. And Marty and I talked about something like that, just because I know normally we have to do landscape screening for any kind of construction near the property line, but given that our family's right next to the administrative building and the court where potentially there'll be Saturday, like, you know, I guess markets and like stuff like that, would be something that we would like if possible.
So I thought that one of the conditions that the planning commission on their recommendation was a replacement of 18, 48-inch box trees. So it's not like that they weren't, we're not going to plant new trees.
I think what Matt's talking about, that was 76 or 78.
It's right in the building.
Right.
Well, it's right on the corner of the building.
And this is something that actually I came up with because I think at the planning commission they actually had the landscape architect there. I noticed along that side there actually were no trees to be planted. It was just like ground cover.
So the redwood is going to remain.
I think that one they're looking at that one right now.
I think we decided that can stay.
Okay.
But the Valley Oak, which is number 78.
Yeah.
That is literally in the.
Understood. And but given the fact that it had so much cover for the backyard, and we I guess at the planning commission I had a chance to actually speak to the landscape designer who was there, and she actually recommended you should maybe ask for mitigation if there was some kind of possibility there, because right now in the plans there are no trees to be planted along that part of the plans. I don't know whether it's because the driveway kind of curves right into it.
Approved a landscape plan yet.
Oh, okay. Just what I saw there. So, okay. Thanks.
So now, I'm sorry, any other member of the public have any comments on that?
Just one comment. On these encroachments, I've been involved in a lawsuit that's been going on for 14 days in trial. And, if you have a new owner that comes in and wants to do something to that hedge, they have the right to do that. And I just think when you make it, whatever you're going to do, you make sure that you anticipate subsequent owners in your decision. That's all I'd say.
Yeah, it would require an encroachment permit, which is totally revocable at any time. Control really resides with the city or the town, Nobody can do anything to that hedge materially without our permission.
Okay, now,
That's a good point.
it's revocable. Back to council. On the trees. Comments?
I have a comment. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the trees, the 5 trees that are recommended for certain removal are due to condition. And there are 3 arborists that looked at them and said, and that that they're sick or dying, poor condition, and they need to be removed, and for safety reasons and everything else. And then the other 13 trees of the 18 that planning commission said you could remove, and then plant additional 18 trees. But there are 13 that, I mean, we're looking at least 6 to be saved, and then there's 7, and of those 7, I think there are others that we can look at to mitigate and either try to move, which is really expensive, right? But you see Stanford do it all the time, or try to maybe redesign. I mean, there's one right over here, and it's right in the middle of the walkway up to the library. And there's grade difference. There's a huge, it's currently on a lower level of what the grade is going to be, and so to save it, you'd have to build around it, right? And the decking would be higher or something. So, I mean, there's a possibility that you could save it. To move it, I know we have to get a cost for that. Somebody said $25,000.
Same price as the Diana's.
This is
Yeah. So we're saving money not doing the Diana statue, we're gonna save a tree.
Do you know what you're talking about? Have you looked at that tree?
Is it really huge?
Yeah. So it's a very large live oak.
Then
It's
we-
as large as the 2 trees in front of my house.
So, just a process question to George, or you're saying, I'm a little confused on what you said. You said the planning commission's already reached some decisions, and
Planning commission makes a decision.
how does that constrain our discretion here in any way? Yeah.
It doesn't.
It doesn't, we can override the plan.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, you can provide staff with direction with respect to the 18 trees.
Okay,
Well-
yeah.
No.
Lisa?
So, I mean, you wouldn't be overriding them because they granted approval of 18, and if you remove less,
If we remove less.
yeah, you're fine, you're within that.
Okay. Which we're hoping
So we can
to
close
do.
that.
Right.
So, remember that. Of the trees that are identified as heritage trees, and including the trees that are subject to removal, there's a variety of trees. And the most common trees are live oaks. There's some valley oaks, there's some redwoods, and there's one carob. I walked this, I looked at every single one of these trees. And the valley, and I'm personally most concerned about the valley oaks and the big live oaks. They're the most beautiful trees, and they do define this town and frankly this parcel. There are 4, I think, very healthy valley oaks, and one is at the edge of the administration building on the western edge, right? I think the problem is that the foundation of the building will totally rip into that tree's root structure. And it's that huge, I think it's that huge trees out there where Steve has had, people dump the root, the wood chips. It's a spectacular tree. It's a shame to lose that tree. I don't know what we can do. We'd have to move the building, I think. The other 2, and I'm just gonna walk you through these 4 and not try to minimize my time, but I think these are what's really important. But I think the only way to save that tree is to move the building back a little.
Yeah, just move the building.
There are 2 trees on the southern end of the police secured parking, number 67, which is a very large, also beautiful valley oak, not quite as large as the other one that I just mentioned, but it's a great tree. And number 66, which is also a big valley oak. And 66 is on the list for consideration to save because it is in a walkway. And we probably just have the walkway go around it.
it's on the edge of the police parking. 67 is right in the middle of what would be the driveway approaching the police parking. So you could go around it, you'd have to take out some parking to the south and come between 66 and 67 to enter that, or you'd have to find another way to come in and restructure that whole parking. And the fourth tree is number 63, which is a valley oak that's currently in the courtyard. And it is a large, if you look at the courtyard, it's a beautiful tree that is right next to the shed, and it completely blocks any vehicle from being able to go around the shed in a southerly, and Steve can correct me because he knows this tree really well, but it blocks you from driving along next to the shed because it's grown up and it's right in the middle of where the road would be. I think it's a perfectly healthy tree. There's one other valley oak I'll mention that is number 69, which is actually on Caltrans property, and it's considered poor condition. It's poor condition because the limbs have been, some of the limbs on one side are deformed, or I'm not exactly sure. Sally would be able to articulate it, but they had a problem with the limbs, and it isn't in the
It's in decline, it's pretty severe decline.
Yeah, it's not as shaped as you would want a tree, but
This is 69?
69, yes.
That's why it's listed for removal due to the
No, I know. It's considered poor.
So Rick, when you said 78, which is, I can see is right next to the edge of the
building.
Okay?
Yeah, that's
And then
right.
there's a roadway there, and there is
That's
space to move the roadway a little bit to the west. Because you're not gonna need that much space around it, we need to protect the roots.
It's an over-X for the footing of the.
Yeah,
of
the
two-story
problem
house.
isn't the roadway, the problem is the footing of the building.
It may also be, the canopy is gonna conflict with the building itself.
I don't think it makes sense for us to go through, us as the council, to redesign the building at this point. So let me ask a process question. I at least feel, I'm here at the council, we need to do something more than we're doing to try to protect these trees.
Yes.
What is an intelligent process to accomplish that? I think we're going to go rather than specific.
Have staff come back with, re-looking at some of the conversations we've had and come back with some reasonable recommendations of what ones they might be able to save.
That will involve redesign conversations at WRNS.
Well, some of it is redesign a walkway.
Which have to be approved by the council.
Understand.
And
Just slow it down to the cost more, you're saying?
$100,000.
Wish we'd done this previously, then we would develop some of those costs.
Yeah, and then the other one is eliminating a parking place or two. Got it?
I understand you're not happy about this. I think that, I'm getting the sense the council, we can get I'm getting the sense that we do want to reconsider some of this and see what the options are to protect as many of these trees.
So of the 7 trees, are we talking about the 5 that are conditioned or just the 7 that were suggested?
You're saying 7, I think there's 13 trees.
13.
That are either considered for removal or planned for removal.
There's 7 plans for removal, 6 we've already got direction to try and save, and 5 for removal due to condition. So the 7 are the only ones that we're saying we need to remove because of the project. The council's saying go back to those 7 and also put them in the category of 6.
Where did the direction come for those 6?
From staff and talking to the public.
Actually, from the PMC, from the Civic Center Advisory.
Well, planning commission too.
The planning commission had
Right.
4, that's what I'm
Right.
very confused about. We're throwing out different numbers, so the planning commission said 4.
PMC and staff came up with another 2. That's
Okay.
6. And so now we're down to 7 that we're actually talking about removal. The other 6, we've already got direction to try and save.
It's the 7 you know.
Right. The 7, we're
7 healthy trees.
7 healthy trees that we believe will seriously compromise the project in some way, or will require some sort of major architectural revision.
Okay, so let's talk, I guess, about those 7s, does that make
Yeah,
sense? Again, but so what process would council like to follow with regard to those 7, assuming the other 6 directions split?
Yeah.
Okay. Thoughts from council? Rick, Bill?
I think that, would be, if we review it, give us input on what potentially a schedule impact would be, and then a rough order of magnitude redesign. But when we're redesigning just a parking lot, I just don't see that it's gonna be that expensive, but.
Right, buildings are more expensive.
Yes, okay, I think it's probably at this point in time unreasonable to think, let's move the building, okay? Or let's change the foundation so it doesn't come down. So in those cases, okay, we may have to, you know, bite our lip on that. But on some of these other ones, I think that there are some alternative things, and if we can save just a couple of them, it's better than not.
I would echo that. I think it's the risk of the cost of X and a building moving, that's a whole different project almost. So minimizing, evaluating what the cost of that is, come back to us with, this is a walkway, this is a parking space versus a building.
Right.
And we want your cost and time estimates,
Yeah.
is that correct? Okay. Rick, does that make sense to you?
I personally would prefer to prioritize Valley Oaks and then Live Oaks.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right, well,
I think it's not
But
gonna.
I think that's what we're mostly talking about anyway.
Yeah.
That,
At the end of the
that
day.
just, I think it might give the staff a little bit of direction that there's some priority on.
yeah.
And the Valley Oaks are the deciduous trees,
Disagree
the
with
Live
that. I
Oaks are
agree,
the evergreens.
I agree that in my brain, the decision would turn more on cost and time, almost no matter which variety of oak it is. They're both valuable. I agree with some of them.
I agree, because I think that no matter what, probably 90% of those are gonna be valuable.
Or there's, I think
It
there's
seems to
only
me
just one Valley Oaks.
then there are probably three that are kind of in the path of a roadway or a walkway that would be four if you take the library entrance.
So 115, 119, and 120.
You know, I
Otherwise, they're in
can't
the
see,
roadway.
I don't have,
So-
this little thing here
Well,
does not
six-
give me the numbers.
But
But
now
I'm
one
just-
fifteen is already, that's not on the list.
63 is.
And so I
it's in
should
the roadway
have
next
brought
to
my,
the-
big piece of paper from the other day.
63,
That's a roadway.
Well, I think that you should know what the seven are.
63, 67, 66, and
Whatever
55.
those seven are.
55 and 66 are already in the list to try to preserve.
Yes, no matter what, they should be the seven that are described here.
What about 63,
63,
67?
78, 101, 105, 119, and 120.
Run those seven again, sorry.
The seven you list in your report are 63,
Yeah.
67, 78, 101, 105, 119, and 120.
Now, 105, I think should be 115.
115.
It should be 115.
Should be 115, yeah.
But this, I know this.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So it was said
Can I
that,
make
that Sally's report recommended retention different than,
Sally's report said these trees are in good health, I don't recommend their removal, absent design. She wasn't looking at it in the context of design, just the condition, health, and prosperity of the
so
tree.
the trees she was saying she didn't recommend for removal are the 7 healthy trees that are recommended for removal, plus the 6 trees that are being reevaluated.
She was only recommending 5 due to condition, and it was like George had indicated, strictly on the health of the tree, not on any other design factors.
Nancy had a comment with this.
Betsy. I just had a comment, when you're evaluating the cost to balance it with the cost of the removal. So there is a cost involved in removing these trees, and you don't just get that for free, so.
That's a good point.
Good point.
May I also make a comment? The trees have value, anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, and they should be valued monetarily. Secondly, trees that are in paving, there are very simple, relatively simple construction techniques, which involves removing the existing hardscape and some of the cases of the trees, air spading, and putting in structural storms, and then a slightly different or impervious surface on the top. And that is a very standard construction detail. And I think it's really unfortunate that 13 viable heritage trees were slotted for removal throughout the design process of this project. And that's unfortunate.
A process point for going out and getting information back. I do think it's important. The public obviously have the right to hear about this and hear the calculations we're making and have the opportunity to present. When would you anticipate being able to come back to the council?
Soonest would be January.
Okay.
I think December, you know, I was thinking, hopefully you can come back with something maybe at the study session, but I realize that's kind of like,
Got a holiday.
by the 20, by the,
Yeah, that's
by
unrealistic.
December.
That's unrealistic.
Maybe by the December first council meeting.
Yeah, I was
some
thinking
slides,
good.
Yeah.
but you wouldn't have a good idea what the redesign would look like.
Well, understanding where we are, I mean, it might be able to
I'm giving
eliminate
it
something
something
right then.
stuff like that.
Why don't we aspire to the December 20 meeting, and if we're not able to make it, we'll slip it into January.
Okay.
But I do think if something's got to happen in a public meeting, we got to comment. Is that, so does the council feel comfortable with that process? Okay. Let's move on.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Going back to, actually, number one is the cost model manager and project schedule. There's really not much changes since your October report, and so I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on those two attachments, 1 and 2 of your staff report. If not, moving on to number 2 item is WRNS has submitted a proposal for some additional design for security and video design sign systems for not to exceed fee of $38,500. And so we'd like to have council give us direction if you want to authorize that for the city manager or the city attorney to draft and the city manager to execute that amendment for that task.
And is there any update or change on this one?
Which one are you on, Martin? 38.5?
Right, 38.5.
38.5 is the security and key systems. There hasn't been a lot of changes to that, other than a conversation from Vice Mayor Weeks that you might want to articulate.
So, obviously on this one, I've got something. We have talked about safety in the rail corridor for years, and with this component, I think adding the additional hard line for video camera capabilities so that we can actually keep an eye on the rail corridor could give us that issue of hopefully reducing the amount of suicides and monitoring the rail corridor. So this is the time to add it in this design component, because this will give us the ability to add a camera that would cover that corridor component.
I don't know, is anything like looking down the tracks to see if someone's...
It's monitoring. As a matter of fact, in January, I was at the League of Cities. You know, between the software components and the hardware components, what it could do is give us that capability of monitoring anything that happens in the rail corridor component. So if any activity would trigger a potential alarm, you could actually add the criteria. So when we're addressing the security component, the system that we'll have throughout the entire building, this would be an added feature that we could have as the monitoring component, that dispatch could be sitting in the dispatch center and actually be alerted to if anybody was in the corridor at 2 a.m. in the morning, it would trigger an alarm. We could actually dispatch a response from the police department to make sure, instead of waiting for something to happen or for somebody to tell us that somebody's in that component, we can actually react as quick as a camera can notify the dispatch.
That's not a video camera, because they're not watching all the things. You're saying having an alarm, so
No.
that would be some sort of sensor.
So, no, it isn't actually. What it is it's a software component that the cameras have, the capability of advanced software which would recognize any movement in the corridor. And basically, you could narrow down your criteria to say, the dispatcher can, or we could narrow down the criteria of whatever that is. Facial recognition and recognition components can recognize regular activity. So if it's during the day and it's the same people, or during the night it's 2 a.m. and it's the same person, the system would actually learn that, in fact, that occurs every morning at 2 o'clock, Joe goes to work. Even the car component would recognize the same activity, so that it wouldn't send a response to the dispatcher. So I think this is an added feature that we should consider as, we're gonna have it in the parking lot itself. So it's just a feature that can give us that connectivity to the rail corridor for a safety.
I'm trying to understand where we would be putting this. This would be on the courtyard shed?
Well, I would say it would be similar to the component that we have related to the park. You know,
We don't own the property.
we own the property up to the rail line. So up to the property line, we could actually have a light pole that could have an overhead camera component that could monitor the entire parking lot in the southwest or southeastern section of the.
Is this just specifically for the rail? It's
No,
not?
no, no, it's for the entire facility itself, because it would be monitoring, that camera right there, with the right camera, can monitor the entire rear section of the police department.
Why are we hearing about this now?
Does the county want this?
All I'm saying, no,
Is that in the scope?
all I'm saying is that at the cost of the 28,500, it'd be foolish for us not to consider making sure that in their scope of work, they add the component of the camera, the hardware component, to a potential add of a camera in parking lot.
That's an add-all bit, okay.
But that's what I'm trying to get under this scope, at this cost.
It's not our parking lot, right?
No, 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 it is our parking lot up to the boundary of our, it absolutely is, up to the up to the one lane that the.
One car length in.
This,
That's
if
right.
we actually put a camera component in the far corner, it could actually monitor the entire, what is it, the eastern side of the entire police station, the backside parking lot, and the whole roadway component, and actually pick up all the rail corridor component. So any movement and activity, so it's just an added feature that if we're doing something.
Added feature, not a different camera.
Not a different camera, same camera.
What if we don't approve this? Will we not have security video systems in our,
They have to be integrated into the plan specs to fit them. That's what
we
they're-
don't have any right now?
No, they're designed by West.
And so this is for the building itself, and what Carrie's saying is he wants to make
Sure
sure,
that in the scope of work, it adds that,
add something.
so that they can.
It's actually, this is Civic Campus as well.
Right. So all I'm saying
He's not
is,
adding the camera, he's adding some technology. to
just the
this
scope of
camera.
work that they consider it when they evaluate the hard line component, so
Will
that,
that add to the fee, to the
That's why I
design
want-
fee?
that's why I wanna keep it at this fee, at making sure that's in the scope of work.
Is it, did you say the county wants to do this up and down the line?
Well, I would say that Caltrain would love to do it, but, you know.
Do you think that they might come with money for?
Well, I think we would always be able to, once, if we actually consider adding the camera component to it, then I would think that we could approach and look for grants related to safety, especially along the rail corridor. If we've already got the hardware in play, it would just merely be adding the software with the camera component, and it's done. And if we're all worried about reducing the number of fatalities on that line, we don't know what the history of the station's gonna be, but if they reactivate that station, it'd be nice to have the ability to know what goes on there. It's a great tool, and I think it would be short-sighted if we didn't consider it.
If it would be reasonable increase to do the design and make the hardware an add-all, fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it at the same cost and just slipping this in and making sure that it's
We
considered.
get it at the same cost, I just don't see it being the same cost, that's all.
Well, they're doing design, so they're gonna be focused on the placement. Sounds like a sensor or software issue that utilizes the
We're gonna have to run a conduit out where we're gonna put the 45-foot pole.
Nobody's on the pole.
It will just use their lines.
I think it's something we could certainly integrate into the scope, go back to WRNS, and maybe even have Interwest or.
Tell them to do it
or,
So
key consulting
I guess,
assistance.
I guess I'm okay with this,
We can ask on that.
consulting agreement for for that, and we integrate the other thing at no additional cost.
I thought it was a great idea. Thanks for all the support.
With the
Remember me and
I
Chris.
went on and on.
Boy, it's a rough road.
What do you need? Motion on that?
Also, the landscape design.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
not happy.
do you want a separate motion on the 38.5?
Yes,
Okay.
I move, but thank
So
you.
moved with Carrie's amendment.
Technically, I think initially you're gonna have to ask if there's any public input.
Oh, I'm sorry, is there any public input on this item?
Anybody supportive of?
I support it. I support Carrie on this.
Thank you. I finally used my guaranteed eight.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. Now, having pulled it back to the council, is there a motion?
Yes, I
So moved.
made to move with
And a second.
Carrie's amendment.
Thank you very much.
Ryan
So
putting his solution and the thing for the same price.
Motion and second,
Thank
all
you.
those in favor?
Of course,
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Marty, you got the next one?
Yes, the third one, Mayor is to authorize the city manager to execute another amendment with WRNS to provide additional landscape design services for around the corporation yard for not to exceed fee of $6,000.
This one, there has been some changes.
There has been a conversation around changing this. The current landscape solution and the scope involves landscaping interior to the courtyard as well as exterior to the courtyard. The exterior is the public facing side of things, but the interior is staff, trucks and such. So we could probably amend the scope to some degree to eliminate the interior, but I'd suggest we retain the exterior. And because it's public facing library, the construction side of it and even the design side of it could be funded through the library funds versus the civic center funds. So it would be less than $6,000, we just don't know how much less.
Okay, thank you for that. We go to the public, any questions or comments from the public on this issue? Seeing none, flow back to council. Comments or questions?
I think it's a great idea.
I'm gonna disagree. I just, you know, I just feel like we're just like getting nickel and dimed everywhere we go about this, you know?
Yeah.
And landscaping, design services for the courtyard site, I just don't see that it's a critical issue. It's like a critical path right now. I don't think it's something we really need to address right now. And what I'd like to do is save the oak tree.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think every time, we've spent a lot of money on this design with WRNS, and every time something comes up, they have their hand out.
So just to back up a sec, we did this on purpose. We told WRNS's original scope of 4.8, almost $5 million, and dropped it all the way down by eliminating all these additional scopes, limiting the courtyard. So they have to come back to council every time we make a change.
We set ourselves up.
I think we have Steve do the landscaping before he goes.
Yeah.
Since he's not here.
All in favor? Yeah. Right.
But I have a question.
Please.
So, the areas that are outside, and I could just be misfocused here, but the areas that are outside the courtyard, that are public facing, the reason that these weren't included in the original landscape plan is that originally they were in the courtyard, right?
Correct.
And now that the courtyard, we cut off the corner of the courtyard at Maple to make Station Lane come in at a 45-degree angle rather than a 90-degree angle. That has theoretically opened up some landscaping area.
Right.
They're
It would be
very
nothing but
small.
It would be,
They're very small. I can do it. I mean, we can get volunteers. We'll get Denise.
It's part of their 5%.
I don't know.
Okay.
I just,
there's connections to irrigation systems, there's all kinds of other stuff associated with it, with these are 2 exterior planting beds.
We should do it, but when I think about cutting off that corner, which is where a big triangle is that is applicable here, we're cutting through what had been the courtyard to make the road. There's gonna be the fence pretty close to the road, so there's not much planning area there. I do feel like Elizabeth is kind of being nickel and diamond these.
yeah.
This whole front area doesn't exist now except it's,
Isn't that gonna be part of the road?
the road's coming back, sweeping here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And if we're gonna be making some of these decisions, I want bigger plans. I want more detail. These little things to look at. It's very frustrating.
alternative is for scopes of work changes that are less than a certain amount, you let staff manage those things and they never come before the council.
Wow.
With regards to getting this landscaping done, I think that we just have MCE do it.
I think it'd be more than $6,000.
This is
The
only, this is only.
5% of contract
We
is what
want,
is
we
in
want
there.
the irrigation
You want it to be
plan
in your project as you bid it.
It does have something, yeah, the sprinklers are a good point.
Right.
We're gonna add those later.
It's gonna be less than 6,000, we don't know what it's gonna be.
I would agree, if we can reduce it down to just the areas
I say
of.
not to exceed 3,000.
I would let staff manage it myself.
You say that, it's gotta come back to you.
And I do,
Well,
I
I'd like
appreciate
to
the
have it
fact,
come back to me.
I appreciate the fact that we did cut it back. I think that's important. I am, in agreement with the general sentiment that it's hard not to feel nickel and dime in this process. It's important to me also that it's coming out of a library fund as opposed to general fund or other funding mechanisms. So I mean, I would be.
But we still care about the cost.
Comfortable moving ahead at less than, obviously, but we're gonna get back from less than $6,000.
Alright. I agree,
I'll move we approve it.
Doesn't matter.
with the considerations of, yeah.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay.
So I say take all the teak out of here. I don't know how teak got into the design. Who put the teak wood finish in the building? I didn't.
I didn't.
Who
In
did
the
it?
library.
It's faux teak.
But the change. Okay.
Can we go, Marty, what do you got next?
Yeah, number 4, Mayor, is the last item for this report, and that is to provide direction on ongoing negotiations with the following utilities. West Bay Sanitary Sewer, and also AT&T and Cal Water. And just to highlight, the West Bay Sanitary Sewer needs to be relocated, part of the project. And we've had a number of meetings with representatives from West Bay. And one of the things that they've offered up as an agreement on this issue is if the town pays for the design to move their system into a new PUE, public utility easement, along the tracks, which is one of your attachments, number 5, and that might be also hard to read, but I apologize for that. Then they'd be willing to pay for the construction portion of that, which is estimated about $70,000. So the deal on the table is, from West Bay, is the town pays for the design and they'll pay for the construction. And if the council's okay with that, then we're looking for direction to work with the West Bay staff to develop an MOU between the two agencies, and then bring that to council, hopefully in January, for your consideration for approval.
And what do you think the design costs are gonna be?
It's $22,000. You've already approved that.
Yeah, I thought so.
And Marty, that is obviously aged infrastructure that has already exceeded its potential lifespan already.
Yeah, they want to plan on removing that anyhow, right?
So we're, hey, I know what it costs to replace my line, so it looks like a deal.
So we're looking for direction on that.
And the direction is just whether you can work with the West Bay Sanitary.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. To work with them to develop an MOU to bring back to council probably in January.
Yeah. Any? Do you want to separate, you want a motion on that?
No, we don't need a
Okay,
motion.
I think that consensus of council seems to be yes.
Okay.
Like we have a
Rich, are you
choice.
good with that? Yeah.
Okay. And the next one, Mayor, is Cal Water. We're still in negotiations with them. The city attorney has been helpful on talking to their legal counsel, because the engineers over there to this date have not been very receptive to any kind of cooperation or cost sharing. And I think we're going to be hopefully getting past that. And I don't know if the city attorney wants to elaborate at all on that, but I think we're going to be making progress in the next couple of weeks with Cal Water. And then we'll certainly bring that back for council's consideration either in December or January also.
Well, they're gonna be here next month, aren't they?
Cal Water?
Yeah.
Probably not the same people.
Oh, we can bring it out.
Right. So Mayor, that's just an update.
Okay, thank you very much.
And then the next one is AT&T cell tower lease. Right now, and there's a lot more background information, of course, in your staff report, but we're in our final 5-year lease with AT&T. And so we have actually a little leverage now. They would like to certainly extend that lease for another maybe 5, 10, 15 years. And so that puts us in a pretty good negotiating position. But in order to do that, they would like a letter from the town stating that, they were interested in extending that lease, but in return, the town wants something from AT&T for the cost sharing for relocating their infrastructure, their communication equipment into a new building and so on. So what we're asking for is direction for the city manager to send AT&T a letter pretty much stating that so we can start the negotiating process with them.
Ms. Lewis, any question?
You said a building, they may want a building?
Well, right now they occupy part of the trailer out there that PD also has.
Right.
And so that's part of the project's gonna go away.
Yeah.
And so we need to build a new building for AT&T equipment and some actually for police equipment, and then possibly for Atherton Fiber Hub to go in there too.
Can we just get a trailer or something?
I don't think Matt wants a trailer.
I had a question on this.
See, if you left, that would have come in. Oh, yeah, put a trailer up there.
Can't we have one of those 10 by 10 huts that we just put up?
Pardon?
I know that we've
Like,
got.
you know, a 10 by 10 hut that
Okay.
you put up, they're inexpensive and you don't even need a permit.
Well, they're right now AT&T is saying they need something at least 12 by 12.
They've got
but-
something bigger than that.
Right. It's got to be climate controlled, and so it's got air conditioning and heating and all that kind of systems involved. So it's a very elaborate building, pretty much.
So Marty, when you say building, they're not considering roll.
No.
I'm trying to narrow it so that we can focus on your building or.
No,
I think it's an obvious point. It sounds like we're in the final 5-year lease with
Correct.
them on this. I'm gonna guess if I'm AT&T and you ask me to spend money on something, I'm gonna seek to extend my lease. And then the math gets involved, you may wanna consider whether we're better off charging them a premium on the lease or an additional on the lease to build in this building.
Right.
So let's be thoughtful about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Glenn?
So they are currently paying about $4,500 a month. Is that market? Is that under market?
I think that's above market when we were looking back at the leases a couple years ago. And every year it increases 5%
It's
a
got an
year.
escalator, right, built into it.
An automatic escalator starts every October 1st.
Right. So it's steady income from the town.
Did you get what you need from us, or do you need more?
Are we okay with the city manager? Okay, sending that letter?
I believe it.
Honestly,
It's what we got.
Okay.
trees you're gonna cut down.
Can we get that, seriously, Sarah, did you get your guidance on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
so then, I'm good, we're good then.
Okay. Is there, what else do we have left to the agenda?
Motion to adjourn?
I heard a motion to adjourn.
Wait a minute, I got a public comment.
Oh, public comment, thank you for another public comment, I appreciate this.
I didn't stay here to study the trees.
Yeah, great, thank you.
And going back to your parcel tax, and you know, I was one of the people that endorsed it, so I feel very disappointed. But in thinking about it, you know, the school district has a parcel tax. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong here. And you have the option, if you're 65 years or older, to exclude yourself. And I dare say that the people who voted against your parcel tax that were over 65 and have been in their house for 30 or 40 years are paying so little in property taxes that the $750 is significant to them. Because I know people who are paying, well, $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month, and $750, they don't care what you do. But the people that really care are generally over 65 because they've been here a long time. Hey, I've been here over 40 years. So my property tax, if you exclude the sewer district and the school district, I mean, they're less than $5,000. And I mean, I know guys are paying $5,000 a month that live here, and a lot more, that pay a lot more. So I'm saying if you exclude the 65,000, I mean, it really makes a lot of difference to the people over 65. But the people who are bought in the last 20 years, hey, $750 isn't that significant. So I would suggest that you duplicate what the school district does and go to election in June, exclude the people over 65, and you got a winner.
Any other public comment?
I agree.
Okay. Okay. Now,